The Monster of Gotham. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 101. Toolman Reed. Heretics. Washer raised his head fearlessly to greet the swooping Eagle Girl. Oops. Lizu jumped out in advance, holding his head and rolling on the ground for several rounds before getting up. Your people are fighting? Reed hid far away and pointed at the Eagle Girl, who was fighting with the black fog in the distance. This time, the Eagle Girl was obviously at a disadvantage. Reed, I have investigated the most critical information about Oakmont, but before entering that door, you must find the key first. Lizu was completely unaware of the two female monsters fighting behind him and handed all the information in his hand to Reed. This is. Reed's eyes flashed with blue light, and it seemed that he had used his so-called ability again, which could see what happened in the past and see guidance. It's here, but Reed hesitated and looked at the Eagle Girl, who was entangled in the black fog and smashed around. The fight between the two of them was right above their heads, and it could affect them at any time. It was also thanks to Lizu that he could remain calm in such a critical situation. Snap! Lizu snapped his fingers, and the entangled Hawkgirl and Washer, one turned into plastic, the other turned into a puppet, and fell to the ground. Lizu bent down to pick up the two toys and put them in his pocket. Let's go. Time waits for no one. Okay. In the night of Oakmont, there were no pedestrians or police on the road. It was quiet, like another world. If it weren't for the occasional faint prayers coming from a few candlelit rooms, the two of them might have suspected that they had traveled to another world. According to the guidance, there seemed to be three iconic. Reed wanted to explain his experience in solving the case to Lizu while he was on the road, but found that Lizu had no patience at all. You look much older. Reed changed the subject. His eyes stayed on Lizu's white hair. Some interesting things happened, Lizu said nonchalantly. Reed ran, still constantly expressing his opinions. In Oakmont, only Lizu was a foreigner like him. Now it seems that the other party has experienced a lot of troubles like himself, and the ultimate goal is to come to Oakmont to find the root of madness. Reed retracted his gaze from Lizu's temples. Oakmont has many things that we cannot understand, and I found that this place is like a gathering of gods. They must have had a lot of fun, Lizu said meaningfully. But there will always be times when you get bored, Reed said, and suddenly, he looked up and exclaimed, the moon is so big, it seems to be getting closer and closer. Here we are. Reed's eyes have never been extinguished since they lit up with blue light. He believes that Lizu is as eager to know the final answer as he is. The voice in the dark is also telling him that it is right to do so. The answer is right in front of him. The two people with a common goal acted without hesitation. The fragments have been taken away, Reed said seriously. In Lizu's opinion, Reed just stood there in a daze for a while, but it seemed that he had seen the entire crime scene and even locked on who the murderer was. Follow me. With Lizu's fighting power, Reed was also more unbridled in his actions. Not far away, they came to the door of a house with a closed door. It seems that the guy's inside. Reed knocked on the door. There was no answer from inside. It seems that the owner is not very welcome to us. Lizu walked forward and gently turned the door handle. The door handle instantly turned into pink plastic. With the strength of an adult, just a little force. Click. A whole plastic toy door that was completely out of place in this dull world was completely dismantled and thrown on the wet lawn behind him that no one cared about. Excuse me, Lizu walked in unceremoniously. No matter how many times I see it, I'm still amazed. What a crazy ability. Reed also hurried in. The Oakmont people's hiding place seemed to be only the basement. In the basement, the man looked at the two outsiders in surprise. You took something that does not belong to you. I hope you can return it, Reed said. The man was tidying up a diving suit. He opened his mouth and said, since the group of fish faces came to Oakmont, our lives as fishermen have become increasingly difficult. I want to take my family away, but we seem to be cursed and no one can leave Oakmont. My family was swallowed by the waves and swallowed to the bottom of the sea. I don't have the courage to enter the seabed, but if you can help me put the cross on their bodies and let them rest in peace. Before the man finished speaking, the black shadow had already jumped out. Hey, Bruce. Reed had no time to stop him. Even if he became an AV, he couldn't stop the crazy guy who was as flexible as a flying man. He kicked the man in the chin. With a click sound of dislocation, the man who was still telling the story flew out with a mouth full of blood. What are you doing? Use your ability to find it. I'm tired of their long-winded stories. Lizu picked his ears, his face full of annoyance and boredom. When they tell stories, don't they consider the feelings of the listeners? Why don't they start from the Big Bang? Alas. Reed sighed. At this point, he could only act quickly to search. Reed looked at Lizu, who used his ability to turn the diving suit into a palm-sized toy and put it in his pocket. He sighed again in his heart. This is really a magical ability. After getting the fragment, the search for the second fragment was not smooth. When Reed opened his eyes again, the sky was already a little foggy. There is a group of crazy believers who tuck away the stones here, including the one we are looking for. Reed said incomprehensibly. They look very hurried. This time they stole it. It seems that they have planned it for a long time. Oakmont is really a weird place. There will be dozens of people stealing stones in groups. Where is the location? Lizu looked up at the sky. The moon was still bright, but the night sky was about to fade away, and it was almost dawn. I'm afraid we have to go by boat. The engine rumbled, and the two squatted on the boat, moving at the fastest speed. After the Great Flood, half of Oakmont turned into Venice, and boating gradually became an important means of transportation. It's here. As soon as Charles finished speaking, Lizu jumped onto the shore first. The moment he landed, the sun finally broke through the sea level. At that moment, there seemed to be mist rising from the sea. It seems that our fate ends here. Number 2 Reed. Lizu stood on the shore and bowed slightly to the toolman Reed. Bruce? Charles Reed was puzzled. His question was destined to be unanswered. Because everything was like a clock that was turned back and returned to the beginning. Everything returned to calm. So calm. Toolman Charles, after completing his current task, disappeared and left. Reincarnation is always with you. Chapter 102 The Stone Eater. Lizu stood on the shore. Everything returned to the beginning. Of course, that also included the boat Charles Reed was on, which had now returned to where it should be. The water was empty. Lizu pushed open the door. Now he had no fragments on him, and now he had to start from the beginning and search for the 3 stones. Excuse me. With his slightly evil laugh, the door was pushed open. A terrified face was facing the door. This was a person carved out of stone, as lively as a living person. From the movement of her hand, it seemed that she was about to open the door and invite Lizu to come. Lizu walked around the stone statue in front of the door, and in front of him were human statues of various shapes. Each stone statue was making movements, lifelike. Do you want to catch Reed number 3 now? Lizu pulled the corner of his mouth and looked at the stone statues that were filled with them. He was still rational now and did not take the initiative to catch Reed and expose his existence. How many reincarnations will he have to go through? The hall was filled with all kinds of strange human-shaped stone statues. In addition to maintaining human-like movements, each stone statue's face was facing the door, as if paying a salute to Lizu's arrival. A very grand welcome ceremony. Thank you. Lizu nodded to each of the stone statues facing him. In his eyes, there seemed to be no stone statues here, but living people, one by one. It was very crowded and lively. It sounded like someone was spitting. Strange monsters were actually ambushing here. More than a dozen. Oops. Lizu checked his double guns. After the knife broke, his bullets were about to be declared used up. The last bullet should be saved for myself, right? Lizu said, throwing away the gun that had no bullets. Lend it to you. Lizu picked up the thin lady statue next to him and rushed to his monster and smashed it. Googie googie. The monster was smashed to pieces, and the stone statue also made a crash sound and shattered all over the ground. Sorry. He only had time to say one sentence before he picked up the stone arm on the ground and rushed forward. The solid stone arm was enough to smash the monster into pulp with one blow, and naturally, the stone would break more thoroughly. The beautiful and charming lady statue was smashed to pieces by Lizu's ruthless hand. This battle gradually turned into a monster smashing game. Ugh. A black viscous liquid hit him with a vomiting sound. Lizu dodged around and threw the stone in his right hand. The index finger of the stone was like a non-standard nail, piercing the monster's cracked head. Papa, he clapped his hands and patted off the stone chips on his body. I'm sorry that you lost 5 companions. I will pay if you accept anything other than bullets. Lizu began to search every corner. There was nothing on the first floor. His eyes turned to the second floor. As expected, the second floor was also full of human-shaped stone statues. Here, he also found the stone stolen by the believers. Smashed to pieces, the stone inlaid with fragments was stolen by this group of crazy believers for unknown reasons, but they did not seem to use the stone to make the statue, but mashed it with a hammer. In the distance, a long table was set up, full of stone statues. They looked lifelike when eating, as if they were really eating some rare delicacy, but when Lizu looked closer, he found that they were eating stones. Teeth. Lizu's eyes were attracted by the teeth on the table. They were bloody, human teeth. Broken pieces of teeth. There were a pile of teeth scattered on the table in front of each statue. What a sculptor who pays attention to details. Lizu approached the face of a gentleman and found that he was missing 5 teeth in his mouth, and there were exactly 5 teeth on the table. Haha, interesting. Lizu retracted his gaze, but suddenly heard footsteps coming from the stairs downstairs. Found it. The fragments were on the dining table, not difficult to find, but the footsteps were getting closer and closer. Lizu walked quickly to the stairs. The stone statues that should have been in the hall just now gathered at the corner of the stairs, as if they were about to climb up. Tap, tap, tap. There were footsteps on the second floor. Lizu turned around and returned to the second floor and found that the stone statues that should have been sitting at the table on the second floor had actually stood up and gathered at the staircase on the second floor. Tap, tap, tap. The footsteps came again from behind. He turned around quickly and the stone statues had gathered half a meter behind him. Lizu made a prompt decision and jumped down the stairs. Behind him was the sound of footsteps coming down the stairs. On the first floor, the stone statues in front had also turned to face the staircase. The magical thing was that as long as Lizu pointed his eyes at them, he would never see them moving. Weird. Lizu quickened his pace and ran out. When he passed by the stone statue fragments on the ground, he noticed that the stone statues not only had human appearance, but also had stone organs inside. Break out of the door and summon the Eagle Girl. As the Eagle Girl struggled frantically, Lizu left this weird gathering place for believers. Flying high in the sky, looking down, the stone statues had gathered on the shore and on the rooftops, baring their teeth and claws to send off Lizu. Ha 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 ha. The laughter resounded across the water. On the first day that the Charon came to Oakmont again, Lizu had already reached his destination at the fastest speed. St. Michael's Cathedral. He had already collected the other 2 fragments, and now he was about to open it to see the final route and understand his role. However, St. Michael's Cathedral was empty at this time. Lizu quickly entered the basement. Hot flames poured out from the corridor. People screamed, the crackling sound of the flames, and the pious voices of those who endured the pain and chanted prayers. When Lizu finally entered the basement, he only saw the flickering fire on the altar, as if everything that had just burnt was just an illusion. The scorching ground proved that everything just now was not an illusion, but a mysterious force that took away everything except the scorching temperature. Let me see. Boom boom boom. The heartbeat obviously accelerated. 3 fragments successfully opened the door to the end of everything. The twisted wall cracked, welcoming Lizu to enter. Ahead, the deep sea. Oakmont seemed to be built on a floating island, with the seabed connected in all directions. What force made an island float on the sea surface, not moving, and not leaving the position marked on the map? Perhaps it was that indescribable thing again. Lizu, wearing a diving suit, moved very slowly in the sea water. He moved forward all the way, until the final destination appeared in front of him. A sunken ship. Is this it? The magical power enveloped the sunken ship. After boarding the ship, there was enough air and he no longer needed to wear a bulky diving suit. Charon. He was confused again. He could not make a mistake with the words on the side of the ship. Did he return to Charon again, or did he never leave Charon? Chapter 103. When the blue fills the sky. Charon, the sunken ship was pressed diagonally on the seabed, but the road on the ship was not crooked. In the familiar aisle of the ship's side, Lizu looked into the distance, which was the dark and deep seabed. Here, there were no Viking crew members, let alone Charles Reed, but only himself. When Lizu followed his memory and returned to his cabin, the newspaper was still on the table. The news of Innsmouth town was still fresh in people's memory. How could he have imagined that he would embark on a wonderful journey because of this? Boom! Charon shook violently. The table tilted, and the things on the table slid to the floor, and people could hardly stand steadily, staggering from side to side. When the violent shaking stopped, Lizu walked out of the room holding the wall. The words of the African-American female fortune teller came to his ears. When the blue fills the sky, reincarnation is always with you. Lizu slowly raised his head. The blue sea water filled his head, and he could see whales swimming in the sea water above his head. However, this whale was not cute. It had jagged teeth and multiple eyes, like a pet of an evil god. Behind it, there was a group of half-human fish monsters that shuttled quickly. Soon, the whale was surrounded and bitten by the fish monsters. The dead whale body could not escape the gravity, and fell from the water, from top to bottom. The giant roared down, and the strong wind it created was spreading over the room. The wooden door of the room behind him was shaking violently, and could be torn apart at any time. Lizu squinted his eyes, blocked the strong wind with one hand in front of him, and his sight naturally followed the hill-like corpse to look down. There was no land under the Charon, but endless darkness and abyss, as if there were eyes staring at Lizu in the darkness. The body fell, and there was no response for a long time. About 2 minutes later, a black shadow jumped out of the abyss where the body fell. A huge octopus tentacle. The thick octopus tentacles gently moved the water above his head, and the fish monsters gathered around the octopus tentacles. Familiar monster. From the beginning, in the dream on the Charon, Lizu had dreamed of the octopus tentacle monster, which was exactly the same as the one in front of him. The Charon was suspended in a strange space. There were endless strange images in front of him. Lizu blinked twice, and everything disappeared in an instant, and he appeared in a new space. In the dark world, a small path stretched out in front of him. There was only one way to go, and now he had no second choice. Lizu moved forward, and people of different colors began to appear in front of him. These people only showed their own death. Some used knives to make themselves fall asleep on the roadside, some chose to swallow guns, and some hung themselves by the neck with a rope under the branches, to make themselves sleep forever. The road ahead is endless, and the illusions are also endless. They seemed to tell Lizu that moving forward would mean death. This was naturally very persuasive to Lizu, who loved his life, but it only made the madman in Lizu more excited. After walking for an unknown amount of time, when Lizu went from being cautious to being accustomed to it, and then getting bored with this meaningless illusion, the illusion finally disappeared. At the same time, the road also disappeared. When he came to his senses, he found that he was already in another strange environment. There were bones on the ground, countless human bones. They were in various shapes and twisted. Led by the human bones, there was an altar emitting a dim light in the distant direction, as if quietly waiting for Lizu's arrival. Lizu walked towards the altar, but accidentally glanced at the corpses on both sides of the road. Several corpses looked familiar, and they just felt that their bodies were somewhat familiar. At first, it was just a corpse wearing familiar tattered clothes, and it was difficult to identify, but as he walked forward, the clothes on the corpse made people hesitate. That was himself. The new skeleton on the ground was Lizu. What a joke. The further you go, the more corpses there are. Countless of your own corpses. Boom, boom, boom. The heartbeat accelerated uncontrollably. Seeing the mountain of corpses made up of your own corpses is enough to make many people mentally collapse. Even the crazy Lizu may not be able to accept this easily. World exploration level 19%. Lizu has long lost interest in caring about the world exploration level. Passively drawn into this huge vortex, it is difficult to escape. If all these corpses are mine, then which one of them should I be here? A strange thought arose in Lizu's mind. His eyes were attracted by the altar in front of him. In front of the altar, there was a familiar person. Johannes van der Borg. He was dressed in yellow, and seemed to have been waiting for a long time. You are finally here. The man raised his head slightly, and the brim of his yellow hat was raised, revealing his face. Now it's time for you to make a choice. No matter what you choose. Johan stepped aside, made room, and motioned Lizu to stand beside him. I will respect your choice at this point. It was not difficult for Lizu to guess Johan's identity. He was probably the omniscient and indescribable existence, and jumping through time and space was like child's play. On the altar, there were 3 stones, 3 choices. Lizu's eyes were focused, and at this moment, he also understood the reason why he came to this world. Is this what the seed means? Lizu trembled and grinned. Ha 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 ha. My daughter, welcome my birth. That exaggerated smile almost tore the corners of his mouth. The gums were bleeding. There was confusion in his eyes, and the whites of his eyes were full of bloodshot. The emotions called confusion and madness almost tore his 7 orifices and rushed out. Lizu did not hesitate, and reached out to grab the stone in the middle of the table. Oh. Johans was a little surprised, but he was also smiling. Obviously, all this was still within his expectations. When his hand was about to touch the stone, Lizu suddenly stopped. Ahem. Oh, I'm too into the role. Different. Johan stared at Lizu. His expression changed obviously. You are different. It was like discovering a mutant individual, but that feeling gave Lizu the feeling that a little black dog appeared among a group of little white dogs. Yes, it was just that look. Enter my daughter's womb and be reborn. Cthulhu? Lizu uttered that name with difficulty. That was not a sound that humans could make. He called the other party's name with difficulty, but he could only imitate and make a similar sound. World Exploration Degree 20%. Obtain the blood of the old gods. World Exploration Degree 21%, 0.21%, 0.23%, 0.24%, 0.27%, 0.30%, 0.34%. It stopped at 34%. Summoning prop box plus 1 summoning prop box. Master, 1%. Chapter 104. Sacrifice to Lizu. Just saying that name almost deprived Lizu of his spirit and thinking ability. And just a name was enough to enhance Lizu's understanding of this world. I almost died. It was really close. Lizu patted his chest, and his relaxed tone seemed to be talking about a trivial matter that was not worth mentioning. He just let go of the repression in his heart, let madness occupy his mind, and acted according to his instinct. Instinct urged him to make a choice. It's just that he didn't understand the thing called Cthulhu and birth. Not only did he not understand, it seemed that just thinking about Cthulhu was enough to make his mind collapse. But one thing is certain, his mission is to enter the womb of Sagana and let the unspeakable thing be born. The other 2 choices are, one is to leave Oakmont and pretend that nothing has happened. This is the reward for the person who reveals the mystery. Johans patted Lizu's shoulder. Lizu did not choose to complete his mission, but Johans was not angry. Instead, he seemed to see a little black dog in a group of white dogs, and paid more attention to it. The existence of the other party is by no means inferior to that of Sagana, or even Cthulhu. Reward. Lizu forced to laugh. The surroundings are all his own corpses. Even though these Lizu may be slightly different from him, Lizu believes that they did not choose to awaken Cthulhu. Besides, as long as Oakmont is not over, who can escape from here? Don't you want to leave this terrible place early? Johans was still persuading softly. It's a good choice. Lizu nodded very straightforwardly. After saying that, he reached out and grabbed the 3rd stone. 3 choices. 1. As the person who found the final puzzle, you can leave Oakmont. 2. Use yourself as a seed. Throw yourself into Sagana and awaken the ancient indescribable thing. 3. Use your own life in exchange for the world's lingering breath for several centuries. Several centuries are extremely long for the development of mankind, but for those ancient beings, it is just a nap time. Lizu, who sacrificed his own life and had to live, made this choice, which seemed to be the least loss. How to get out before that? He turned to ask Johans. The way has been prepared. Johan smiled and pointed to the right. Space toward the invisible door. Outside, it was already night in Oakmont. Ding dong, the pointer of the ancient pendulum clock has reached midnight. In the basement of the abandoned room without lights, a woman's soliloquy can still be heard. Cuckoo, cuckoo. The mechanical cuckoo popped out and announced the time on the hour. Lizu sat on the recliner, quietly enjoying the tranquility of the moonlight. the sword he was leaning on in his right hand, with his thumb lifting the blade guard, unsheathing, sheathing. The moonlight reflected by the sharp blade made Lee Su's face look flickering. Whoosh. There was a sudden gust of wind behind him. Lee Su just noticed it, and before he could turn his head, he was hit hard on the back of his head. A few minutes later, in the basement, Lewis from Innsmouth was gasping for breath, and a syringe was inserted on the ground. He was just a few seconds away from being injected with that strange liquid. He didn't know what would happen, but it was definitely not a good thing. Lewis only remembered that after he answered the questions of the two strangers, the yellow-skinned stranger knocked on the door and kidnapped him. When he woke up, there was only a weird crazy woman dressed in sexy clothes who wanted to give him an injection. The most terrifying thing was not just that. The woman disappeared, and in front of him, she turned into a plastic toy. "Help me." At the Sagana altar, in the torn space, Lee Su walked in with the unconscious Lee Su. Johan's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise, as if in the monotonous world rotation, someone made a subtle choice, even if this choice was also in the future he knew. "You are the most interesting person I have ever seen." Johans did not hesitate to praise him. Let's just think of it as a compliment. Really? Obviously, this evaluation is more meaningful to Lee Su. Lee Su, who made the choice, sacrificed his life to let the world survive for a few more days. He never cared about the world, but he had to exist with it for the thousands of hours he was born. Moreover, sacrificing Lee Su was not difficult. He just needed to catch his future self. At least I'm the first one to make this choice. Lee Su was very satisfied with the information he got. Without the unconscious Lee Su knowing anything, he became a new member of the mountain of bones and corpses here. After wasting a night's effort, Lewis struggled, broke the ropes that bound him, and climbed out of the basement. He shouted for help all night but no one paid attention. He also wasted a lot of energy for no reason, causing Lewis to be delayed until the morning. Of course, he would definitely not tell others that he was tired of shouting and slept. "Call the police." Lewis rushed to the police station without stopping. Although the police looked down on Innsmouth people, they were particularly serious about handling cases of outsiders. With the help of Innsmouth brothers and the search of the police, it was not difficult to obtain the whereabouts of an outsider. Lewis and the police rushed to Oakmont Pier. The ship named Charon was about to set sail. "That yellow-skinned foreigner who kidnapped me." Lewis pointed at Lee Su, who was saying goodbye in the distance. Lee Su, who was saying goodbye to Johans and Charles Reed, was stunned when he saw Lewis. Then he smiled. "Mr. Policeman, Mr. Bruce Wayne rested in my house all night last night. We talked all night. Is there any misunderstanding?" Johan stopped the policeman. There was no need to think about which side to believe between the testimony of the local prestigious upper class and the testimony of the Innsmouth people. The police looked at Lewis with anger. Offending the upper class? They still want next month's salary. "I'm responsible for investigating the case for Mr. Slogmorton. This Mr. Lewis seems to be related to the murder." Although Charles Reed didn't know what happened, he decided not to follow the agreement when he saw that the Innsmouth people did not follow the rules to make trouble for him and others. Lewis's identity was immediately changed. "Catch him. Send him to Mr. Slogmorton." The police shouted almost at the top of their lungs. After the episode, the three continued to say goodbye. "I hope to see you again in the future." Charles Reed said goodbye to Lee Su. "It's a pity that we haven't talked much yet." They didn't have much to talk about. After all, they only knew each other for one day. "See you next time." Johannes van der Borg smiled, and he had this expression from beginning to end. Calm. Everything is under control. That may be a few centuries later. Lee Su waved his hand and turned to walk towards the Charon. At the cost of one's own life, the world can be exchanged for a brief peace, and when time comes to the end, the seeds should embark on a journey for their own mission. A corpse is a sacrifice, and that mountain of bones and corpses. How many times has the world survived? Chapter 105 Fish Monster. The wooden planks connecting the dock to the Charon swayed, ready to break at any time. The ship weighed anchor, and black smoke billowed. The magical town of Oakmont was submerged by the waves behind it and disappeared above the sea level. It was a strange place where gods and demons gathered, and faith, cults, etc. were everywhere. "This is your room." After glancing at the ticket in Lee Zoo's hand, the crew member of Viking descent impatiently led Lee Zoo to the guest room. It was still the room that originally belonged to Lee Zoo. I don't know if this crew member was careful and remembered that Lee Zoo still lived here, or if this was just a shortcut to the kitchen, so he brought Lee Zoo here. Before entering the room, Lee Zoo noticed the neighbor in the next room, a mysterious man wearing a strange gothic windbreaker, an eagle-like hat, and covering his face with a scarf. Next to him was a huge, slender object wrapped in yellowed bandages. After sensing Lee Zoo's gaze, the mysterious man raised his head and nodded to Lee Zoo. Weird man. Lee Zoo raised an eyebrow, forcibly suppressed his excitement, and returned to his room. That's right, it was still his room. No one was diligent in helping him clean up. Everything in the room was untouched, including the exquisite skull cane that Lee Zoo had left here when he left. It was leaning quietly against the bed, and the empty skull eyes looked at Lee Zoo. We are really destined to be together. Lee Zoo walked to the bed and picked up the skull cane. He shook his wrist lightly and dropped it twice. Whoosh, whoosh, the wind was whistling. The sharp metal tip of the cane felt a little heavy in his hand, which was just right for Lee Zoo to use as a handy weapon at this time. Lying on the bed, Lee Zoo rested his head on his arm. He did not recall what happened in Oakmont. For him, who was too weak, even looking up at Sagana, Cthulhu, and other beings was difficult. Reading their names almost made Lee Zoo unable to bear it. Caring too much is just like an ant worrying about the eating, drinking, and defecation of humans. How much food should a stomach as big as a human be filled with? It's just a fuss. In front of Lee Zoo, an information bar that only he could see appeared. Space-time gate, cooling down, countdown. 1354H. Only 1354 hours left in this world. More than 7,000 hours evaporated out of thin air. Or did I experience countless reincarnations during these 7,000 hours of evaporation? Recalling the mountain of bones and corpses, perhaps he was the dozens or hundreds of people to arrive. Oakmont was a town entangled in weirdness, a stage for the drama that indescribable things were paying attention to. After leaving there, the data bar that was turning with difficulty returned to normal. It is also possible that the data bar was also confused by the reincarnation of time, and it was not until he left Oakmont that he realized how long he had been here. Very interesting. The fantasy of this experience is probably even greater than the unknown data bar on him. His eyes continued to move downwards. World exploration degree 34%, summoning item box, master, 1%, toyization, mastery, 13%, acrobatics, passive, mastery, 25%, aura, influencer resurrection. 1 inch. He stood up and checked the contents of his item box. The item box fell from the sky. After opening the box, the space inside seemed to be much larger, 5 cubic meters, but the size of the individual items could not be seen from the outside. In addition to Harley Quinn Yo-Yo, Crazy Hawk Gerald, and Priestess Washer, there were also more than a dozen bottles of Boxian potion that could suppress emotions, and the blood healing potion list obtained from Dr. Grant. In addition to this, there was one more thing. A crystal cup, with strange octopus tentacles, animal heads, and hideous and delicate fangs wrapped around it, and a drop of blood in the cup. What a delicate and beautiful drop of blood. It was like a flowing ruby, shining with a brilliance that should never belong to this world. The strange blood, like a vortex, guided Lee Zoo to slowly open his mouth. The crystal cup slowly approached his lips, and the cup tilted. Ruby blood flowed. But before his lips touched this strange blood, Lee Zoo woke up in advance. He immediately pulled the cup away and put it back in the prop box. Diseases enter through the mouth, he admonished himself very seriously, as if he could not find a time to drink the blood. What would be the consequences of regret after drinking it? With 2 lives, he might not want to try that feeling. Blood of the old god. He remembered the reward he had received. After coming to this world, Lee Zoo had a new seriousness about rewards. Besides, what are the old gods? What are the indescribable things? And what are the old rulers? These existences have long surpassed Lee Zoo's brain's ability to understand. He lay back on the bed, turned over, snorted twice, and closed his eyes. But for a long time, he couldn't rest well. I don't know how long it took, and the room was very dark. The boat was shaking, From the gentle shaking at the beginning to the violent shaking. The pirate ship in the amusement park was probably not even 1/10 as shaken as this one. There were still shouts from the crew outside. "There's a storm at sea. Damn it, what's hitting the ship? Is it a shark? If it keeps going on, the ship will be broken. Damn it." The heavy drunkenness could be heard in the curses. They could tell whether it was themselves shaking or the ship shaking, which probably took a lot of effort. The curses began to be mixed with the screams of the passengers. Crack, a flash of lightning struck from the sky and smashed into the sea, illuminating the dark sea world in a second. Lizu stood up, put on his windbreaker, grabbed the skull cane beside the bed, and walked out of the room. The Charon swaying in the storm was no different from a lonely leaf in the sea, and it could be swallowed by the tens of meters high waves at any time. It was very difficult to stand firm on the ship at this time. Listening to a series of screams, there must be another group of people being thrown to the ground. A big storm is coming in the distance. The twisting tornado on the sea surface rolled back into the sea water in the sky with the power to tear everything apart. If they are unlucky, they will all die here. The cane barely helped, supporting Lizu to walk in this violently shaking corridor, but the others fell hard and were very miserable. He walked to the side of the ship and looked down. His pair of dark eyes shot out an inquiring gaze and smashed into the sea surface. Under the dark sea surface, there were black shadows swimming rapidly. Soon, was it a school of swordfish or a school of sharks that went crazy after smelling blood? The black shadows were moving in a planned manner, lining up to hit the bottom of the ship. That's right, it is guaranteed to hit the same place every time. The slapping of the sea water, plus the collision of the black shadows, waiting for the Charon is only sinking. Splash. The black shadow suddenly tore the water surface apart, allowing Lizu to see clearly what the culprit was that caused the hull to shake violently. Chapter 106 Old Seal. That was a monster that looked like a human. It was naked, its body was as slippery as a fish, and it barely retained the characteristics of human limbs. Its head was completely fish-like, with protruding eyeballs that were not closed. Its hands and feet had webbed feet, and its back had fins with scales. It was very similar to the monster that Lizu had seen in Sagana's illusion. At that time, it was far away and could not be seen clearly. Now, after comparing them in his mind, the similarities between the two sides were infinitely magnified. The inconspicuous waves on the turbulent sea surface splashed, and the woman's sudden scream was swallowed up by the sea water in an instant. Only the white lace hat was carried by the sea breeze, and passed in front of Lizu, and finally followed the strong wind, and rushed into the sky, flying farther and farther. Bang! Another collision. The violent shaking of the hull drew Lizu's attention back. They don't want to eat people. Lizu found some clues. The target of these monsters seemed to be the woman on the boat. The man who was thrown into the sea by the violent shaking was soon pounced on and hugged by two monsters. After a few seconds, the red color spread, but was quickly diluted by the sea. Boom. They broke into the deck below. The crew's panicked voice came from the cabin. Damn, it's those monsters. The scene just now had been noticed by many people. At this time, when they heard that monsters had rushed into the cabin below the deck, the passengers' fear could no longer be suppressed. Panic spread. The crowd began to swarm toward the deck. Lizu squeezed the crowd and walked towards the cabin. The cabin was full of sundries and luggage. The gurgling sea water was already ankle deep. The windows in the warehouse were broken, and the waves that were raised by the waves poured into the cabin one after another. An apple floated and hit Lizu's patent leather boots. Help! Help! The thin crew member who was usually responsible for odd jobs fell into the sea at this time, and next to him was the body of a strong Viking-blooded crew member. In front, the hunched figure of the monster walked forward step by step. Sir, run. The thin crew member noticed Lizu. He didn't think that Lizu's thin body could fight the monster in front of him. What could he rely on? Could it be relying on the exquisite cane in his hand? There are guns in the armory. There are guns in the armory. We can definitely kill it. Ho ho ho. The fish monster, with strange noises coming out of its throat, took the initiative to pounce on Lizu. Perhaps in his opinion, Lizu was more threatening. The skeleton cane was swung up, and the tip of the cane was like a sharp sword tip. Puff. The fish monster was pierced through. There was also a strange stench of rotten fish in the blood. The death of a fish monster did not have much impact on the disaster. Soon a second fish monster came in through the broken window. The tip of the cane stabbed forward one step earlier. The corpse blocked the hole and became a patch, temporarily alleviating the crisis of sinking the ship. The corpse that blocked the hole suddenly moved, and the corpse was pulled out, and then another fish monster came in. One after another, they came one after another. Lizu had no choice but to wave his cane again, but this group of monsters had an endless number of terrifying people. They were endless. Use this. A woman's voice. Lizu glanced back and saw that it was that weird person. Unexpectedly, it was a woman who was nearly 200 centimeters tall, much taller than Lizu. The other party threw something over, and Lizu took it and spread his hands to look at it. It was a strange stone. There was an even more strange pattern on it, a 5-pointed star with an eye carved in the middle. Eye decorations can often be seen in oakment. Strangely enough, the monsters that were still coming one after another just a moment ago, after seeing the strange stone in Lizu's hand, seemed to have seen something terrible and fled out frantically. The mysterious woman stood on the stairs, and it was obvious that she hated touching the seawater. Of course, it was not ruled out that she was also afraid of death. Lizu moved his legs in the water towards the hole in the bottom of the boat, while dragging the monster corpse on the ground. The corpse blocked the hole, toyization, and the next moment, the fish monster corpse turned into plastic. The material is wrong, he muttered to himself. The fish monster material changed from plastic to a dead body that exuded a foul odor and dripped with disgusting liquid. Then it changed again and became a plush toy. No, he was still trying. Every time he turned it into a toy, he would make the target into a toy made of uncontrollable materials. Plastic and nylon cloth are not the only materials used to make toys. Metal is also one of them. The solid steel fish monster body, like a cast steel statue, blocked the broken window tightly. It has grown too much recently and is difficult to control. Lizu handed the strange stone back to the mysterious woman. Old Seal. The mysterious woman moved her eyes away from the rubber and explained. This ability can definitely be called weird, and she only glanced at it slightly. The thing that the deep divers fear the most may not be the deep divers. The deep divers? Lizu muttered the name of the fish monster. I heard that the deep divers would attack ships and abduct women on the ships to give birth to offspring. I didn't expect to really encounter them. Listening to her voice, I hated this disgusting thing. Help. The screams continued. When Lizu, the mysterious woman, and the 3 thin crew members returned to the deck, they saw a scene that looked like the end of the world. Crack, lightning flashed, and deep divers climbed onto the ship one by one. The attack plan to sneak in from below the deck failed, and they could only choose to attack by force. But this does not mean that they failed in action. On the contrary, in terms of numbers, they are still in an absolute advantage. Bang! Fine iron sand spurted out, and a deep diver's chest was hit like a honeycomb, and it fell into the sea backwards. Ha ha ha. Monster. Come on. The captain with rosacea laughed, while holding a homemade modified shotgun. His actions made the deep divers angry. The 4 deep divers used their hands and feet together, like vicious dogs, digging up the seawater on the deck. Puff. A steel gun flew across, accurately nailing the 3 deep divers to the deck like skewers. The woman shouted with full energy, holding an axe in her right hand, and chopped it firmly on the back of the 4th deep diver, not only smashing it on the deck and cutting it in half, but also leaving a huge axe mark on the deck. The captain, who was stunned just now, came to his senses and quickly reloaded. Her neat and tidy battle did not have much impact on the invasion of the deep diver. The hull of the Cheron was 14 meters long. A flash of lightning flashed across, illuminating the dense and strange grey eyes and hideous fish heads around the side of the ship. Take them to hide. The woman threw it to the thin crew member Old Seal. He had seen the Old Seal, so there was no need to waste too much time explaining it at this moment. The crew member hurriedly caught the Old Seal and fell down because of it. Even so, he held the Old Seal tightly for fear of damage and loss of its divine power. Everyone follow me. He held the Old Seal high and really gave the green light in the deep diver pile. Seeing this effect, the passengers immediately followed. There were only a few crew members left, all of them were seriously injured, and staying would only be a burden. The red-nosed captain couldn't even hold his gun, and he only had the strength to breathe deeply. Only Lee Zhu and the mysterious woman were left on the deck. With hundreds of deep divers watching them, their fate seemed to have been determined. No one believed that the two could calm down the battle, they just wanted to survive for a while longer. Chapter 107 Telescopic Cane. The woman stepped on the corpse of the scuba diver, pulled out the steel gun, and twisted it against the short-handled axe in her hand. Click, mechanical bite. It was combined into a long-handled axe of about 240 centimeters. The axe hit the board, pressing a hole, and the heavy force made the diver tremble. The woman's tall and thin figure was like an aristocrat, and there was a strange coordination with the equally thin axe. Roar with a hoarse roar, the diver rushed towards the woman. But when the axe rotated and chopped, the diver who rushed over would fly backwards at a faster speed, fall into the sea, and finally be swallowed by the ruthless waves. The feathers on the eagle's beak had swayed in the wind, stained with 1 or 2 drops of blood, and the feathers turned bright red. Why don't you help? Swinging the axe was very energy consuming and lethal, but it also made her physical strength run out very quickly. The woman turned her head and glanced at Lee Zhu, only to find that he was actually watching motionlessly. That roar not only brought Lee Zhu back to his senses, but the deep divers also realized that there was another living person on the deck, so they all flew towards Lee Zhu. 1, 2, 3, 4, 10. The woman watched with her own eyes as Lee Zhu was pounced on by 10 deep divers without any resistance, and was crushed into a small mountain. Before she could say a curse word, in a flash, the 10 deep divers turned into 10 plush dolls. Pa. That's why I don't like sashimi. Lee Zhu sat up and retched. You are, what kind of monster? Even with her face covered, one could imagine how wonderful her expression was at this moment. The strangeness in front of him could not scare the deep divers, and they pounced on him again. Lee Zhu shook the skeleton cane in his hand. Click, as if it touched a certain mechanism, the skeleton cane of about 60 centimeters suddenly unfolded and turned into a 2.5 meter long iron chain whip, and the split cane became an iron hook chain, which was extremely sharp. Crackling, the chain whip passed by, and the deep diver who rushed over was torn and bloody, and fell to the ground. But the attack did not stop there. The force of the iron chain was difficult to control. After being swung to the extreme, it suddenly retracted, and hit Lee Zhu again. Seeing the sharpness of the iron whip with his own eyes, Lee Zhu's life was not enough for this thing to scratch lightly. The acrobatics ability from the Flying Grayson family, an ability that was integrated into his bones, was displayed to the fullest at this moment. Lee Zhu jumped up and dodged the iron whip sweep. The iron whip that swept away hit the deep diver behind him accurately, bringing out a bloody rain. The force continued, and the reaction force pulled the chainsaw back to Lee Zhu. Lee Zhu tapped the ground with his toes again, and he easily demonstrated his acrobatic skills. The iron whip was getting faster and faster, and the whooshing sound finally condensed into a swish. From the woman's perspective, it was a ball composed of the after images of the rapidly dancing iron whip. The deep diver who approached would be seriously injured or even die. Crack, another flash of lightning. The blue light pierced the darkness, like a bell ringing before dawn. Lee Zhu landed on his feet, and his physical strength quickly ran out. The iron whip was completely stained red by the blood of the deep divers, and the bodies of the deep divers were piled up around him. With a slight lift of his wrist, the open mouth of the skull closed, and crack. The iron whip quickly shrank, and unexpectedly combined into a cane again. Nice toy, Lee Zhu commented with satisfaction. Whoosh. The axe came towards him, but stopped 20 centimeters away from Lee Zhu's head. A deep diver's head fell off. It was the woman who did it. She used the axe skillfully, so that the heavy thing only chopped off the head of the deep divers, but not Lee Zhu's head. The woman raised her long legs and kicked the axe handle. The axe was like a fan, stirring the smell of the sea and rotating around the woman's body, blowing away the deep divers around. With a thud, the axe hit the deck. The battle was still going on, but it seemed that the deep divers were retreating. At the boundary line, where the sea and the sky met, the sun tore through the thick clouds. The storm had passed. The two fought all night, but what they got was countless bodies of deep divers on the deck. After the battle, the woman had no intention of talking to Lee Zhu. She disassembled the axe, pulled the bandage, and carefully wrapped the axe again and again. The long-handled axe was disassembled and easy to carry. Then, she carried the axe and passed by Lizu. This woman is so tall. Lizu raised his hand and gestured on his head, meaning that the other person was ridiculously tall. Is it over? The wind was calm, and the brave crew walked onto the deck. At first glance, the white-haired man standing in the sea of corpses and blood, holding a cane, looked like a god or demon. Is there anything to eat? He turned around and smiled, which frightened the crew. Such a terrible monster can kill dozens or hundreds at will. Who is the monster? Yes, of course. Charon, cabin dining room. Lizu was the only one eating, and a trembling crew member brought him food. Scorched bread, canned beef, water. Guest, I'm afraid this ship can't go to Boston. The captain came over in distress. Although he was also afraid of the strange man in front of him, just like the strange woman, he knew better who saved the ship. Is this a ship to Boston? It was the first time that Lizu knew the destination of the ship he boarded. Your friend said that you want to go to Arkham Town. Our ship will dock at the port near Boston, but now the strange things that happened on the ship can no longer support us to sail far, so we must dock nearby. Arkham. He could imagine that the friend must be Johans who gave him the ticket. The mysterious man in yellow seemed to have never let go of his gaze on Lizu. The Charon finally docked at the shore, a small and desolate port. But it seemed that only Lizu and the tall mysterious woman could get off the ship. A yellow bus was waiting at the shore early. There was no one in front of the bus stop, and there was only the driver on the bus. I wish you a safe journey. The captain paid for Lizu's fare at his own expense. What a kind person, Lizu sighed. On the Charon, the captain directed the crew to collect the bodies. I didn't expect to encounter such a thing. The captain's face was pale. A large number of crew members were killed and injured. It was wishful thinking for the Charon to set off again. Wait for me to contact that damned soldier Indica. Next time I see them, I must greet them fiercely with cannons. Huh. The captain exhaled heavily. Collect the bodies. Don't let anyone get off the ship. They didn't dare to keep the two monsters who could fight monsters all night, but those ordinary people all had to stay. Such a big thing happened, and some witnesses had to be left. Thank you Zenly for the huge reward of 1000 points. Chapter 108. Two strange people traveling at night. Ding ling ling, the station bell rang, and the bus was about to depart. Lizu took 2 quick steps and jumped on the bus, which was about to move. Where are you going? The old driver of the bus was a Mediterranean white man, about 40 or 50 years old, with a beard that hid his entire mouth. He had a toothpick in his mouth, which was like a toothpick stuck in a pile of dry grass, shaking as he spoke. In the pocket of his plaid shirt, there were 2 cigarettes placed diagonally. Boston. He had to go to Boston to transfer. In the last period of time in this world, the only thing that could interest him was Arkham. You can't get there, the old driver said, while biting the toothpick. You can transfer. It's not far from Boston. Lizu had no choice but to accept this suggestion. Before the bus moved, another person got on the bus. The mysterious woman carrying a tightly bandaged axe. Her clothes were a bit weird, and the old driver couldn't help but take a second look. Where are you going? Next stop. The woman gave the money and sat at the back away from Lizu. The old driver was unwilling to talk to a woman whose body was as tall as a tower. He collected the money and started the bus. Ding ling ling, the bus started shaking. The path was rugged, but the road ahead was strangely quiet. Lizu, who had exhausted all his energy, fell asleep in a daze. When he opened his eyes again, it was already dusk. The shaking bus finally arrived at the station. Now he thought about changing to Boston. Small town, not many people. Most of the houses are 1-story buildings. They are close to the sea and most of them have spire tops. The houses are mainly painted white, and some houses have some special posters posted at the door. Posters of famous singers and movie stars, slogans of churches, or the duties of a certain weird family. Everything looks so peaceful and so normal. The hotel at the corner of the intersection is a 2-story building, and it is the only 2-story building here. The faded wall, the old tree with a huge shadow covering the road, the ancient and simple atmosphere of the hotel hits you in the face. However, at this time, this old hotel was dressed in new clothes. The entrance was very lively. Some people were even building a bonfire with wood. There must be a celebration party in the evening. There were not many pedestrians on the road. Fortunately, they were not as xenophobic as the residents of Oakmont. Lizu and the mysterious woman, two outsiders, walked by without attracting much attention. The ticket office of the station. "Where are you going?" Lizu turned to ask the woman. Those who could interest him were not normal people. The woman did not answer. Lizu seemed to have expected the other party's attitude a long time ago. He shrugged and leaned towards the ticket window. "Madam, the bus to Boston, thank you." Among the lunatics, perhaps only he and the clown could be so gentlemanly. The space in the ticket booth was narrow. There was enough space for a table, a tray of snacks, and a woman. The ticket seller was a middle-aged woman in a green suit with a cold attitude. No more. She raised her eyelids, glanced at Lizu's face, that was obviously not a local, and said, "There will be no cars in 3 days. There will be no cars in the next 2 days. What about not going to Boston?" Lizu asked again, and forced a smile. Well, how cute his smile was, but in return, he only got disgust from the female ticket seller. The peaceful town gave people the feeling of walking into a Disney fairy tale. Lizu, who had just experienced Oakmont and the shipwreck at sea, would not believe that there were stories with comedy endings in this world. Even if there were stories, they would definitely end in tragedy. This utopian world built on a terrifying world was morbid and made Lizu feel uncomfortable. "No matter where you go, there is no car," she replied. "The next 3 days are the town's celebrations. The drivers are all famous drunkards. They will not leave their champagne for a moment." She was not happy at all when she mentioned the celebration. It was like stating a pedantic and bad habit that should have been abandoned long ago. "It seems that we are temporarily trapped here." Lizu turned around and shrugged at the woman behind him. "Do you want to experience the carnival party here?" Speaking of carnival, I actually know a few people who like carnival very much. There are cars in the next town, the ticket seller took the initiative to say. She seemed not to want Lizu, a foreigner, to stay here. Or it might simply be because she is not as indifferent as she looks. "How far?" the mysterious woman asked. "About 20 miles. Go east." The ticket seller was a little uncertain. She seemed to have never left the town and only heard about the existence of the next town from hearsay. "Thank you." After thanking coldly, the mysterious woman turned and walked east. Lizu couldn't stand the utopian perfect town. He walked much faster when he could leave. The two of them left the town and walked east. The woman ignored Lizu's deliberate companionship along the way. Lizu didn't seem to have the intention to speak, but occasionally laughed uncontrollably. It got dark quickly. On the side of the road, the grass was gently blown by the wind, and the leaves rustled. Carrying a big axe, the woman's physical strength was also consumed quickly. She took a rest on the side of the road and spoke for the first time. "Have you seen those things?" "Those things?" Lizu waved his walking stick, making small round holes on the ground, to relieve his boredom. "I have seen them on many people." The woman covered half of her face, so her expression could not be seen clearly, but her general meaning could be guessed. The human brain cannot bear that knowledge. She found a reason for Lizu's crazy laughter, which seemed to be a reason known to everyone. What if you accept too much of that knowledge? Go crazy. She stared at Lizu and said seriously, "Then, die. You are the poorest person who has lived the longest I have ever seen." Hehe. Lizu couldn't help laughing. "Sorry, I don't want to laugh. I just can't control it. The best psychiatrists in Europe can't cure this disease either," the woman continued. She seemed to be used to it, and Lizu was not the first crazy laughing weirdo she had seen. "I have investigated ancient documents. There was a church more than 100 years ago." She did not hide anything and told what she had seen and learned. "The appearance and disappearance of that church are very mysterious. I can only find out from the lost documents that the church once made a magical potion that can cure all diseases in the world." When she talked about curing all diseases, her eyes were extremely firm. She firmly believed in the existence of this potion. Potion that cures everything. Lizu's voice brightened a little. Although he didn't hate laughing, the damn crazy laughter could really ruin people's mood sometimes. "It's time to set off." The woman stood up with the steel gun. The moonlight led the way in front, and the rustling leaves were thrown farther and farther behind. There are too many mysteries about the woman. For example, she has no specific destination, but she is in a hurry to get on the road. For example, she has the strength to wield a giant axe, and her slender figure like Victoria's Secret models. For example, she is not as tall as a normal person. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 109 But at this moment, Lizu seemed to be more intoxicated with his former identity as a detective. The moonlight was like an amplifier, and the weak light magnified all the unreasonable things on the ground. Barefoot, long toenails, there must be a lot of dark dirt inside. Lizu squatted in front of the footprints on the roadside, rubbing his chin with his fingers, frowning. Along the way, similar footprints increased. Very thin, weighing no more than 30 kilograms. Walking very fast. Monkey? No, monkeys don't have such big feet. More like human. This is not a human, she suddenly interrupted Lizu's muttering. The woman didn't care at first, but after seeing the footprints, she seemed to think of something. There should be their nest nearby. They? Lizu is better at catching sensitive words. He rubbed his hands and looked forward to it. There must be more than one kind of monster in the world, and he will see the second kind soon. That must be very helpful for him to understand those indescribable things. Be careful not to alarm them. This place is very close to the town. If they run over, those people will be in danger. The woman still did not explain what they were, but from the few words she said, it was certain that they were numerous, moved very quickly, and posed a great threat to humans. Yes, we must find them quickly. Lizu nodded vigorously, his face full of excitement. He did not care whether those people were dangerous or not. He just wanted to find them quickly. Knowing the danger of the unknown, he became more and more curious. Perhaps, as the woman said, the pursuit of unknown knowledge is beyond the scope of human brain and will eventually lead to madness. Lizu was always full of curiosity. He chose to step into madness step by step. The moon vigorously reflected the sunlight, trying to be a beacon for finding the way. The quiet country road, except for the rubber tire marks, was all their footprints. The two followed the footprints and approached them step by step. Starting from a minute ago, the footprints became very messy in several places, and the number also increased significantly, from 2 or 3 footprints to 20 or 30 footprints. The crooked weeds led them like a signpost. The walking stick swept away the weeds and crooked holly that blocked the road, followed the footprints through the road that only monkeys could pass, and finally stopped in front of a well. The stone wall of the well was more than half a meter high to prevent people from falling in, or the corpses of wild animals from polluting the water source. However, the well had been in disrepair for a long time, and the surrounding weeds were overgrown. It seemed that no one had come to draw water for a long time. Wild animals might not visit this place either. The moonlight was blocked by the high crowned branches. Leaning down to look into the well, the darkness was suffocating. Breathing also became much stickier. The human brain has unconsciously begun to imagine. When staring into the darkness, there is clearly nothing in front of the eyes, but the brain will imagine the incomprehensible and terrible scene. The most terrible fear in the world comes from the unknown. They are right down there. The woman sounded very sure. It seemed that this was not the first time she had seen them, and it was possible that she had obtained relevant information from a certain book. Exploring the unknown and gaining more knowledge is human curiosity and human instinct. They never appear alone. We have to be careful. But compared to her cautious instinct, there was another freak who completely indulged himself. Lizu had already turned over and jumped down. Oh, a strange cry tore through the quiet night. You. The woman had no choice but to jump into the well. She couldn't bear to see Lizu go to his death. The 4-meter deep well was more like a cave deliberately disguised as a well. But what surprised the woman was that her feet were not in contact with the well water or the dry soil, but a soft trampoline. A light bounce dissipated the force of falling and supported her back and pushed her aside. She was bounced up, and after her feet landed, she staggered forward 2 steps before she stabilized. The woman turned her head and found that the ground had turned into a blue trampoline of a strange material. After she landed, the trampoline turned back into soil. It was clear who had done this. On the Charon, she had seen Lizu turn the body of a deep diver into a metal sculpture. After she put aside her surprise, she began to observe the world under the well. The bottom of the well, which had been dry for a long time, was very hard. It was estimated that it had been dry for decades, or there had never been water here. What was even more amazing was that the moonlight could shine in accurately and illuminate the surroundings. Every corner of the bottom of the well could be seen with a slight turn of the head. Here, Lizu caught the footprints with his eyes and squatted in front of a wooden board on the ground according to the footprints. The wooden board was like a sewer manhole cover, solid but not very heavy. It was well hidden. Pulling open the wooden board, the cold wind from the center of the earth blew up, raising dust, blowing Lizu and the woman behind him to the ground. The strange eccentric wind with the smell of death messed up people's heartbeats. There seemed to be something indescribably terrifying in the underground black hole. Boom, boom, my heart beat faster uncontrollably. The woman standing by also clearly noticed that Lizu was grinning, silently laughing. It seems that the underground is unobstructed, and there is a huge air inlet, Lizu said. When the wind stopped, they were finally able to look under the wooden board. There was no moonlight underground, and it was pitch black. It was not until the moonlight above his head sprinkled into the hole that his sight could vaguely capture that world. Below was a black tower, 10 stories high, or 20 stories high. After all, it was pitch black further down, and it was impossible to see clearly. Perhaps this was a magic tower connected to the abyss, or it might just be an abandoned building sealed underground. Woo, 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 woo. After the rustling sound like a mouse drilling through the wall, there came a strange sound similar to a child's cry. It, coming. The woman reached behind her with her left hand and grabbed the short axe wrapped in linen and bandages. It was obvious that she was very nervous. Lizu put down the wooden board, grabbed the cane with his backhand, and waited with a smile. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Squeak. The wooden board was pushed away from below, and then a humanoid monster with the size of a 13-year-old child and skin and bones crawled out. Dead white skin, wrinkled, huge palms and soles, black nails, hyena-like mouth. Hideous ferocious monster. Ho ho wah wah. It made a strange sound in its throat. Its knee-length arms drooped, and its legs moved forward. It turned its head slightly, and its nose moved, as if it smelled the scent of humans. Puff. The sharp cane pierced its head, and then pulled out, splashing thick black liquid. It fell to the ground, its body twitched twice, and it was no longer breathing. A bit weak. Lizu shook the monster's blood off his cane with disdain. The cane gently moved its corpse. This is. The Gowl woman is like an encyclopedia. Thank you Amadeus Harnglikian book friend 150,510,121,304,999 for your awards. Tomorrow is a special day to mourn the martyrs and compatriots who died in the epidemic, so I will update tomorrow's content in advance today and will not update tomorrow. Chapter 110 Weird Assimilation. Wow, this is the first time I've seen a real person. Lizu was like a star chaser. He stared at the ugly corpse curiously. Lizu's memory went back. In the Flashpoint world, the first floor of the mansion, where the clown lady hid, was covered with paintings of this strange creature. Everything in the painting seemed to be real. The hyena-like monsters that barked around the witches who were sent to the cross and burned to death. Sneaking into the human world at night. Sneaking into the house through the window. Crouching on the chest of a sleeping person, with fangs bared, ready to bite off a person's throat at any time. The things in those paintings actually exist. Gals gather in groups. Soon they will find that one of their companions is missing, and then they will go into a defensive state. It will not be so easy for us to wipe them out. From what she said, the gals in this world are different from what Lizu knew. They are a group of highly intelligent social creatures. Really? I'm looking forward to it more and more. The two entered the underground world through the cave. As a messenger of justice, they must not stand idly by when they found a group of gals so close to the human town. Their feet landed on the Black Tower, and the historical atmosphere from the black bricks of the 17th century was transmitted to their souls. In a world without any light, they could only rely on what their palms touched and move slowly. The black tower was dilapidated, but it was strong enough to be a ladder connecting to the world above ground. It took about 20 minutes for their feet to land on the ground. Their eyes gradually adapted to the dark environment, and they could barely catch some effects in the dark cave world. The underground world was full of rocks. There were no workers to cultivate the land, and there were no floor tiles. If the soles of the boots were not thick enough, they would probably get pierced through the soles of their feet. They groped and slowly moved forward, holding their breath, trying not to attract the attention of the ghouls. They followed the sound, and walked forward for an unknown period of time. After climbing over a huge rock, they really saw the general outline of the monster kingdom. Wow. Wow. The ghouls were calling their friends a small monster society. There are a lot of them. The woman stuck her head out to observe for a long time, and finally gave up using the long axe to deal with the current predicament, and took out a pistol from her waist. Lizu stared at the gun for a long time. If he was asked now if he wanted to rob it, he would nod without hesitation. Compared with cold weapons, weapons that can shoot and shoot are more exciting to use. Wow wow wow. Wow wow wow. The calls were strange and rhythmic. They were not the meaningless roars of wild beasts. They were chatting. The two followed the direction of the sound. The underground world was not completely without light. The well that Lizu and his companions walked down was not the only interface connecting the world. For example, now, the huge starry sky above their heads cast light selflessly, illuminating the underground world in the distance, but allowing Lizu and his companions to hide in the darkness. Under the starlight, the terrifying ghoul monsters sat in a circle, and among them was a 2 or 3-year-old human child. It was indeed a human child, with white skin and yellow hair. After 1783, he was a child of the newly established country on this colonized land. However, the child was trying to grow a mouth and imitate the cry of the ghoul. In front of the child was a rotting corpse. Wow wow ho ho. A ghoul took the initiative to come forward, barked twice, and then lowered its head to bite the corpse. The human child barked twice in a low voice, and followed to bite the rotten meat. Roar. Ho 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 ho. The human child's behavior was correct, and the ghouls barked happily, as if to encourage and praise. I read it in the classics. The woman lowered her voice, but couldn't suppress her disgust. Sometimes they sneak into human villages and exchange their children with human children. They will turn humans into ghouls. Speaking of this, her tone revealed not only disgust, but also hatred. The ghouls' child has grown up. Can't you tell? Lizu stretched out his hand in front of his face and gestured. The ghouls' mouth was like a hyena's. How could it be hidden in the crowd? Will have certain characteristics. Ghouls raise humans into scavengers, but the blood of ghoul children is destined to make them unable to become humans. The bloodline of eating carrion cannot be changed. When entering human society, they are just ghouls that look like humans. However, they can raise humans into new ghouls and develop their own tribe. How smart. Lizu looked at the group of ghouls squatting in the distance, his eyes more interested. The ghouls in this world are by no means ordinary low IQ scavengers. They have IQs that are not inferior to humans. With the same intelligence as humans and a more agile body, they are now willing to hide in pits and caves, using stealth to eat away at the human world. They are only satisfied with rotten meat, the woman explained. It was unknown which book she had read to get so much knowledge. As long as there is enough rotten meat, they have no pursuit, and are willing to hide in underground pits and tombs. Her tone seemed to be amazed. The book records that ghouls will hide in sewers, caves and other places, and the number does not exceed 20 or 30. And now, perhaps the disappearance of the ghoul killed by Lizu finally attracted the attention of the tribe. There were shouts one after another. 100? 300? Or 1,000? Exclamation mark. They did not rush into a damp cave of a ghoul to punish evil and promote good, but accidentally broke into the kingdom of ghouls. There were rapid sniffs from all directions, and the ghouls' noses were twitching. Roar, wow, came from the back. We've been discovered. The woman said. We've alarmed this group of ghouls. If they go crazy, it will be a disaster for the nearby town. The first one has already pounced. What bad news? Lizu pressed his hands on the stone and jumped out with a split. His body seemed to have wings, moving quickly in this rocky underground ghoul kingdom. The woman who was hiding in the same place could only hear the trample footsteps getting farther and farther away. Lizu's sudden action alarmed the group of gals. Woof. The hyena-like barking. Each gal has the agility of an acrobat. They use all four limbs to chase Lizu. At first, there were 1 or 2, then 40 or 50, and then hundreds. They chased after him like a tide, trying to swallow Lizu. Bang! The gunshot. In the empty underground world, the echo was so loud that it was like a bombardment. The woman did not choose to stand idly by. She held the long axe in one hand and grabbed the gun in her left hand. There is another invader. The gals immediately decided to split into 2 groups, but the main group was still chasing Lizu, and the situation was very critical. Chapter 111 Kingdom. Crack. Leather boots stepped on the ground. The rotten bones were under Lizu's feet, and they were broken like dead branches. He bounced up again, and the cane turned into a chain sword. He swung it gently, and the gals that rushed towards him were blown away. A large handful of black liquid followed the chainsword back and scattered all over the sky. This damp underground kingdom has a few more strange smells of rotten corpses. Lizu seemed to be escaping meaninglessly, but his agile body seemed to be able to perfectly bear it all, giving him a slight advantage in this chase. He jumped up again, landed, and turned 360 degrees in the air. The complex somersault acrobatic movements were done in one go. Lizu gently pressed the mechanism in his hand, and the chainsword quickly retracted and turned back into a cane. He used his calf to push against the wall and jump far. As soon as his front foot left, the swarm of gals behind him knocked over the wall. They trampled on each other and continued to pounce on Lizu. Compared with Lizu's clever evasion and occasionally taking action to deal with 2, the mysterious woman's fight was much more wild. She swept the axe with one hand, knocking over the gals that surrounded her like a rising tide, and quickly fired with her left hand, taking away 2 gals that tried to attack. However, no matter which side, it was only a matter of time before they were overwhelmed by the gals. He opened his arms and jumped down from the sky like an eagle with wings spread. It seemed that he miscalculated. He did not expect that the ground in front of him would be a pit 10 meters deep. This time, the ordinary tumble to the ground turned into jumping off a cliff. Lizu took a deep breath and exhaled heavily. Faced with the situation of falling to death from a high altitude, he chose to stretch out his hands. His body fell rapidly. If there was no backup plan, the sharp rocky ground would definitely take his life in the first place. His palm landed first, but there was no sound of blood and broken bones. The sharp stone turned into a water-filled balloon when it was touched by his palm. No, it was only 1 centimeter away from touching it. After Lizu released his ability almost to the fullest, a large area of the ground turned into a colorful water bowl world. Pa pa pa! Exclamation mark. Dozens of water balloons were crushed and exploded, successfully buffering the gravitational potential energy. The giant pit is not a meaningless existence. What is displayed here is a castle. Wow wow. There are cries of young gals in the castle. Several ugly little heads popped out of the castle windows. Roar, woo woo. There was a crackling sound of falling behind him. The gals smashed the water balloons and were frightened by the water splashing all over their faces. In the world of balloons, they have difficulty moving. Lizu, however, has already used his hands and feet and staggered into the dilapidated castle in front of him. As seen from the outside, the castle is full of young gals and some nobles wearing clothes. They have their own social system. As an outsider, Lizu aroused the hostility and vigilance of the gals in the castle, and they stood in front. Woo woo. The large group of gals behind him poured in from the gate of the castle. The Black Ocean has surrounded Lizu, and being the midnight snack of this group of scavengers is his final destination. I have to give it a try. Lizu grinned. He silently calculated and counted. Ah! He roared, pressing his hands to the ground. Snap. Snap. Toyization activated. Toyization. Mastery. 13%. Able to turn the object touched into a toy. Whether it is a living thing or a non-living thing, Lizu has never encountered anything that cannot be turned into a toy since he obtained this ability, and the most difficult one is to turn the Mayan priestess washer into a toy. In the current situation, if Washer is used to help, the situation may be better, but how can the priestess who hates him so much help obediently? So, facing the gals that filled the castle and poured in like a tide, Lizu made a crazy decision. He wanted to turn the entire castle, including the gals inside, into a toy! Exclamation mark. Mentally exhausted, physically drained, the huge price was exchanged for a strange ability that radiated from Lizu. The ground turned into pink plastic tiles, and then spread to the load-bearing columns and walls. Then up to the second and third floors. Of course, the gals whose feet touched the ground could not escape. The gals who tried to pounce on Lizu with their claws and teeth bared seemed to be staring at the Gorgon, and their bodies stiffened, turning into plastic toys. All these changes were so fast that the other gals had not reacted yet, including themselves, and the entire tribe was quickly turning into toys. Lizu's situation was not optimistic either. After a while of overloading his abilities, his hair had turned snow white, like seaweed soaked in seawater, floating away from the control of gravity. The toy transformation was not over yet, and the gal's attack continued. His body also changed. His skin was slowly turning into a toy. The skin on his right arm turned into plush. Because his abilities were still active, he was not affected. But the moment he stopped his abilities, the damage to his body tissues was enough to cause him to bleed to death. It spread like a virus, from his right hand to his neck, chest, waist, legs. Lizu was turning into a stuffed toy. Finally, more than half of the gals turned into fear and were controlled in this toy castle. Oh, that's bad. Lizu moved his mouth with difficulty and pulled out a stiff smile. His body was out of control, and he couldn't stop turning into a toy with his brain. What's wrong with you? The woman rushed over with scars all over her body. It looked like only skin injuries. The mask covering her face disappeared, revealing her true face. But Lizu didn't have time to sigh about that at this time. His eyes stayed on the other person's face for a long time. Cut off my head. Darkness. Wake up. Lizu woke up, and the pain below his neck flooded him like a tide. You just turned into a stuffed doll. After I knocked you out, the hair disappeared, but you were bleeding all over your body. The woman seemed to have been waiting for a long time. Her face was wrapped in gauze again. Thank you for the bandages. Lizu's eyes could see the parts of his body that were tightly wrapped in bandages. It was precisely because he had an extra life that he was so presumptuous, but it is okay now. Keeping this life and suffering a little pain. As you can see, I have a disease. When I was 9 years old, I saw with my own eyes that my grandfather turned into a werewolf under the moon, and he ate my grandmother. The woman fell into memories, painful memories. Since I was 12 years old, my body has also begun to show these characteristics. The wolf-like mouth is what she wanted to cover, and it is also what Lizu saw. My uncle is studying the mysterious church, so I can consult some ancient books from him. As I get older, the characteristics of a werewolf in me are becoming more and more obvious. I seem to be able to fight against those ugly things while investigating. Her tone sounded, and it was unclear whether she was celebrating or lamenting. According to my investigation, there once existed a potion that could cure all diseases. That medicine must be able to cure my disease. Chapter 112. The town where witches were burned. While she was telling her story, she was staring at Lizu, fearing that this guy would look at her strangely. Unexpectedly, he interrupted her story impatiently. I'm not interested in your story at all. What's going on behind you? He was not interested in the werewolf-faced woman, and he didn't care about her pitiful family history. The terrified gal hiding behind the woman attracted his attention more. He should be a gal cub that was replaced into the human world. The woman looked back at the timid gal and said, one day, he woke up unexpectedly and returned to this tribe. She seemed to find a sense of sympathy in the other party. It doesn't like to fight. It used to hide in the distance and watch. Woo woo. The gal who was once a human came to Lizu with a piece of rotten meat in his mouth. After carefully putting it down, he quickly ran away and hid behind the woman. Among such a ferocious monster, there is actually a kind coward. Thank you for your kindness, but I prefer roasted food. Lizu sat up with his elbows propped up on the ground, and this action tore countless wounds on his body. Woo woo woo. It has something to show you. The woman seemed to be able to guess what the gal meant. After a while, it held a package in its right hand, supported itself with its other 3 limbs, and ran to Lizu like a chimpanzee. It handed the package to Lizu like a treasure. He thinks you are an ancient god. The woman pointed to the distance. Your divine power has conquered it. Not only the gal in front of him, but from the woman's amazed tone, she must have been conquered. Lizu looked in the direction of the woman's finger. The terrible castle full of gals disappeared, and in its place, there was a pink castle like Disneyland. The castle with a fairy tale atmosphere and the kingdom of gals underground. The weird combination appeared before their eyes. What a lovely style. Lizu had no awareness that he had created the strange scenery. He took the package, which was made of silk cloth, but was tattered by the bite. Inside was a Bible with the signature David Delaporte. David Delaporte? Lizu asked the gal. Unexpectedly, the gal nodded excitedly. It had lost its ability to speak about humans, but its memory of being a human still remained. A book from the 17th century. Lizu noticed the publication time of the book. The gal in front of him was at least 200 years old. We must go back quickly. Tonight is the fire festival witch carnival night. The gals will choose this night to sneak into human towns. The woman was still worried about another thing. David said that a small team of gals are preparing to act tonight. Being a superhero and saving ordinary people from danger is what Lizu's old enemies do. According to the traditional customs of Gotham City, his mission should be to create chaos and cause trouble to the whole world. I'm not good at saving people, and I need to take a short break now. Lizu turned over and lay on his side, indifferent. Aren't you interested in witches? Witches? Lizu sat up. It was just a brief contact, but the woman had grasped Lizu's psychology and knew his uncontrollable interest in the unknown. David said that it was present when the witches were hanged and burned. The group of witches had a direct connection with the unspeakable things. They might have left something behind. He had no interest in the unspeakable things. They were just a group of guys with absolute strength and a completely different way of thinking from humans. The treasures left by the witches could not attract Lizu's attention. He was simply interested in witches. If we can't get back faster, we won't find anything. The woman urged Lizu to act. Wait, I have something else to take away. Lizu stood up with great effort. Not to mention the pain. The bandages wrapped around his body greatly restricted his movements. He staggered to the toy castle and pressed his hands on the plastic toy wall. The huge castle shrank little by little. He stopped his ability in time when his nose bleed. The huge castle also shrank to less than 5 square meters. The prop box fell from the sky. A shabby little wooden box easily swallowed the toy gal castle. Gal David was already kneeling on the ground. This is a miracle. How should we get up? Lizu pointed to the bandages on his body and asked the woman. The woman came to Lizu, grabbed Lizu's shoulders, and lifted him up gently, then carried him on her back. It was as if she was stepping on a spring. She jumped 3 meters away with a light jump. She used both legs and moved very fast. Gal David followed reluctantly behind. Lizu turned around and his eyes fell on the running legs of the woman. The battle tore her leather boots, revealing her white calves. White with wolf hair. The battle with the gal seemed to have awakened her bloodline, and she became much stronger than before. The black tower was like flat ground under her feet. After sprinting for more than 10 steps, they rushed straight up. The strange atmosphere in the dry well under the moonlight has not dissipated. With a whoosh, a figure emerged from the dry well, breaking the whistling wind. After the black shadow, there was a small hyena-like monster following. After landing, without any pause, they continued on their way. In the small town, the carnival has entered the second half. In the square in front of the hotel, there is a huge well-shaped bonfire, with flames soaring into the sky. People carrying iron rakes, hoes, and holding torches gathered here like cult believers attending a worship service. Burn, burn, burn. They shouted excitedly at the bonfire. Ha ha ha. A piercing and strange laugh. Burn. Burn the witch to death. Go back to Satan's crotch. The harsh curses kept coming out. Almost everyone in the town gathered here. The firelight illuminated their faces. The strange red fire, the dark bridge of the nose and the shadow of the eye sockets made everyone's already hideous and twisted faces ugly and ferocious. At the edge of the crowd, Lizu and his partner arrived. It seems that we missed something. Being carried by the giant allowed him to see farther. The bonfire was not just burning wood. 7 or 8 thin figures made this burning punishment not a simple show. It seems that you don't need to come to rescue. In the hands of these crazy guys, the gals are useless, Lizu said. The gals died under the iron rakes and hoes of a group of excited and crazy farmers. You've exposed yourself, girl. The old woman covered in a black cloak walked up to Lizu and his partner, saying meaningfully, tonight, they are crazy, and any non-human creature will face a catastrophe. The woman lowered her head, and she also noticed her exposed calves. Come with me, I have a place to hide you, and the injured need to be healed. Thank you for the reward from Chapter 113 Witch Carcassev Clinic. It is located on the second floor of an old bookstore. Behind the second row of bookshelves in the bookstore, the stingy wooden staircase is the only access to the old lady's clinic. Put the injured on the bed. The old lady led the way. The situation of the small clinic is not optimistic. Not only is the area small, but it can only be placed in the narrow attic above the bookstore. The sanitary conditions here are also the same. The old lady Karkasev gently cut a bandage with medical scissors, untied the bandage that was stuck with flesh and blood, and revealed Lizu's bloody wound. There was no complete wound. It's terrible. She looked at Lizu in surprise. You are still alive after such a serious injury. Maybe he will die soon. Lizu didn't seem to care about his own life or death at all. I will treat you, but you will have to stay in bed for a month or 2, otherwise, the infection of the wound will be enough to kill you. The old woman said, you need to take good care of your illness. Then, let's talk about our business first. The old woman turned her head and said to the woman, Madam, it will be very inconvenient to expose your legs. The woman's right leg shrank back, and the look she gave the old woman was also very dangerous. The woman's reaction was like a wolf when she was poked in the place she cared about most. I have a pair of new boots here. The old woman didn't care about her gaze. She turned around and searched in the worn-out cardboard box and finally took out a pair of leather boots with sharp hooks. I hope they fit my feet. Thank you. The woman took the leather boots hesitantly and put them on. With her tall figure, it was not easy for her big feet to find a pair of suitable boots, but this pair of boots was just right, wrapping her wolf-haired calves. Lizu turned his head. Are you a witch? The old woman's expression did not change, but she still kept smiling. Yes, I'm lucky to be alive until now, the seed of a certain terrible existence. I smell the breath of that terrible great existence on you. The little guy is so afraid of you. Is it because he smelled the wrong breath? The old woman smiled. The figure lying on the small window of the attic was David, the gal who left with the 2. She had not seen Lizu's ability, so she could only guess. Which? The woman looked at the old woman in front of her in surprise. This mysterious power owner who existed in history, their existence is a mystery. They can talk to unspeakable things, have strange powers, and the ability to not age. But the ending cannot end well. At the end of the story, the fire always ends everything. In 1692, that day, the old woman fell into memories. A horrible atrocity broke out in this town, and they wanted to try witches. Out of 1,500 people, 150 were hanged and burned to death. But none of them were witches. To be precise. The old woman paused. I was the only witch. After they killed me, I became a witch. I lived nearby, and have survived until now. I have no interest in tracking the footprints of gods, and I don't like to study witchcraft. Perhaps this is why I have survived until now. So, the people in this town always hold a bonfire carnival night, just to celebrate the festival of burning 150 people to death. The woman knew a lot about monsters, but knew very little about humans. This is human beings. The old woman smiled. I have seen through all this. Looking at the woman in deep thought, she pointed meaningfully. Stay away from the crowd. Stay away from this country. That is the best way to protect people's boots. I can't leave this land for the time being. Ancient books record a healing method called blood therapy. A blood therapy that can heal everything. I'm looking for the last blood of the old gods. She seemed to trust the old woman very much. The blood of the old gods? That is something that is impossible to get, the old woman said, picking up a syringe and walking towards Lizu. The next operation will be painful. I will give you anesthesia first, Seed. The needle pierced Lizu's arm. Snap. Lizu's bandaged hand grabbed the old woman's wrist. The serious injury made his wrist tremble, but the dark eyes that could not be hidden under the snow-white hair had already seen through everything. You are too anxious, lady, he grinned. I just want to heal your wound first. This anesthetic will help you fall asleep. When you wake up, your problems will be healed. What are you doing? The woman looked at Lizu strangely. She didn't understand why Lizu stopped a kind-hearted person from healing him. His wounds were so serious that he could die. Which, you have a devil's mouth. So wonderful. Ha ha ha. Lizu laughed, and his laughter seemed to be contagious. The woman couldn't help laughing. The Gowl David on the window shook his head twice and laughed strangely. People who can be chosen by those beings are really different. The old woman sneered and quickly retreated. A strong smell of witchcraft spread. I was just affected by her witchcraft. The woman stopped laughing. Thanks to Lizu's influence, she woke up. How do you know she is pretending? The woman was wary of the old woman, and at the same time approached Lizu, and helped Lizu sit up. Her disguise can't cover up the desire in her eyes. Maybe the stories told by the old woman are true, but Lizu is a person who doesn't like to listen to stories. He prefers his own feelings. What if he guessed wrong? That's not within his consideration. Moreover, from her address to Lizu and her eagerness in action, it can be seen that the old woman's target is Lizu, who is the great Cthulhu Seed. Her strange laughter came from all directions. Without the thick smoke and black fog, the two of them slowly lost their vision, and their eyes were like highly myopic, and couldn't see clearly in front of them. Come on, Seed. Let me understand the great existence behind you. The witch appeared silently behind Lizu like smoke, and her fingers like dead branches rested on his shoulders. The voice that became harsh due to excitement has the ability to force the soul to tremble. What do you want to do? Kill me? Lizu took a deep breath and grinned. No, I just need your body. Obscure spells came out of her mouth. Hoarse strange tones, unspeakable words, wrapped around Lizu from all directions, engulfing him. What is this? The witch screamed. Let me go. Let me go. Ah. The blur dissipated, and the vision was restored. Lizu was still sitting on the bed, bleeding, and in his hand was a toy doll that looked like a witch. The ugly voodoo doll. Perhaps this was her original appearance, and the kind old woman was just a disguise. Chapter 114. Addiction Blood Therapy. Lizu lay on the bed, gasping for air. His vitality was exhausted, and everything was back to zero. So this is what death feels like. It's completely different from sending someone to die. Lizu stared at the ceiling, as if admiring death. Are you okay? The woman came over and shook Lizu, but found that the left half of his body had turned into metal. His body turned cold. However, at this moment, he just wanted to laugh out loud. At this moment, he also realized that he was not chaotic, and there was a fundamental difference between him and the clown. The influence of the seed from Cthulhu belonged to chaos, while he himself was more inclined to neutrality. Chaotic neutrality, chaos and neutrality. Blood of the old god. He turned his neck stiffly. When he was about to die, his ability was out of control, which allowed him to turn his neck, while ensuring that he was in the toyization state. I just have a drop here. The prop box fell from the sky. The box seemed to be waiting for the woman to open it. She walked over doubtfully and opened the box. What caught my eye was the toy castle of the gals. There were also a few women's toys inside. The crystal cup with a drop of blood attracted the woman's attention. She couldn't look away from the blood. The voice in her heart also told her that this was the legendary blood of the old gods. There was a piece of paper under the crystal cup of the blood of the old gods. Blood therapy. There are enough materials. I can prepare the medicine now. Just hold on. In the small cloth bag she carried with her at all times, there were bottles and jars, which turned out to be materials for blood therapy. This is a clinic, and the equipment required for preparing medicine is complete. What she pursued was actually in the hands of the person next to her, and now she got the blood of the old gods, which made her extremely nervous. She carefully mixed the medicine 1 gram at a time, fearing that she would make mistakes. Even if there was only 1 drop of the blood of the old gods, it was enough to make 2 blood therapy reagents. 2 without dilution. Lizu was lying on the bed. Half of his face had turned into metal. What else can be more touching than a dying entrustment, making people live up to it and do their best to do things. The speed of making medicine is very fast, just a few minutes. When the liquid that was injected into the syringe and flowed like a living liquid was brought to him, Lizu could not help but be attracted by the flowing ruby. This is the blood therapy that can heal everything, and it can cure all diseases. The woman aimed the syringe at the half of Lizu's body that had not yet been metallized. The red potion was pushed into his body. The blood therapy potion broke through the metallized blood vessels domineeringly and rushed into Lizu's heart at the first time. Boom. 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 As the heart beat again, the potion circulated in his body. The magical power flowed through his whole body. In the haze, Lizu saw a pool of blood spreading on the ceiling, and a monster as big as a palm gushed out, lying around Lizu, with a leech-like mouth, approaching him. Suddenly, his eyes flashed. Lizu woke up. The pain in his body disappeared. He sat up and spread his palms. All the injuries were healed. Not only that, he could feel that his body was full of energy, and it seemed that he could run farther and jump higher than before. Congratulations, the woman brought a mirror. In the mirror, Lizu's hair turned black again, as black as the night sky. Blood therapy, it's amazing. He looked at the needle in the woman's hand, with a strong desire to try it again. Even though he was fine now, and didn't need any treatment, he was eager to try it again. Unfortunately, the woman's needle insertion speed was too fast. I recovered. She untied the bandage wrapped around her face, and stroked her face. A very beautiful woman. She took off her boots, and her calves were white, not covered with wolf hair. Congratulations, Lizu smacked his lips. He was still savoring the taste of blood therapy, and judging from the woman's expression, she seemed to be the same. My name is Erica Besson. The woman finally introduced herself to Lizu. Perhaps in her opinion, she had finally returned to normal, and could use a human name. Bruce Wayne. Bruce, where are you going next? Erica turned around, and picked up her axe. Perhaps she didn't even realize that the axe, that was a little difficult to lift, was now as easy as a straw. We should send the witch from more than 200 years ago to accept the price she should have paid. In the small town, people laughing at the bonfire, praying, iron rakes, hoes, torches, praying. The midnight bell rang. The crackling flames illuminated the road ahead, and the devout townspeople gathered here, as they had been doing since the beginning of the night. Drinking and having fun, men and women making love. All indulgences will continue, but only after the witch burning celebration is over. Do you want to burn something too? The image of the two outsiders was too conspicuous. As soon as they walked to the bonfire, they were stopped and asked by the locals. There is a witch. I want to send her back to where she should go. Lizu took out a toy doll and gestured. A toy, haha, but today is the witch's Memorial Day. No matter what kind of witch it is, she should get this special treat. Lizu threw the doll at the flames, and turned around, and left with Erica. A few minutes later, the ordinary burning doll suddenly emitted black smoke, and let out bursts of shrill screams. The townspeople were first shocked and horrified, and then they fell into a carnival. It seemed that the haze that weighed on everyone in this town was swept away. Perhaps, in another 100 years, the traditions of this town will still continue. It's a pity that the traces of the two outsiders have long disappeared. David seems to be hiding something from us on the side of the road. Lizu pressed the head of the Gowl David with one hand, and the tip of the skull cane was aimed at the Gowl, ready to take its life at any time. At such a close distance, how could the Gowl Kingdom and the witch who was hundreds of years old live in peace for hundreds of years? Woo 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 woo. David seemed to be imitating the movements when he was still a human, bowing and begging for mercy. Erica said nothing, and seemed to be ready to kill David herself. Forget it, I'll spare your life. Lizu sighed kindly, and raised his hand gently. The Gowl David Delapore, who had turned into a toy, was thrown into his Gowl toy castle. After a night of hard work, they rushed to the town, and took a bus to Boston. However, the two parted in front of the Boston station. Erica Besson, who had cured herself, decided to stop her journey. She now wanted to return to the normal world. Although after knowing how bad this world is, the normal world is just an illusion for the ignorant to live. Ignorance is bliss, and in this world, it seems particularly correct. Lizu got on the train to Arkham alone. Chapter 115 Arkham Town. The train kept turning and kneeling, making people dizzy. Lizu was sleeping by the window, and his snoring drove away the upper class who wanted to sit over. How could there be such ignorant and vulgar people on this train? The two men who were talking were also disturbed by the snoring. I have to teach this yellow-skinned bastard some local customs. The man in the long windbreaker raised his fist, as if he was ready to show off his power with his fist. The white guys around cast hopeful eyes, hoping that fists could teach the outsider who did not belong to this land a good lesson. The mission is the most important. The man in the black suit stopped his companion, McGee. He gritted his teeth, but still sat back in his seat. After all, we are going to that strange place this time. The last accidental raid did not get the information we want, so this time our target is the old refinery, and we need to investigate it clearly. McGee glanced at the sleeping Lizu, who was dressed like an upper class person, and was vulgar like a lower class person. He was just a strange person, and he was just a little eye-catching. I heard that Fowl was going to intervene, the companion asked. They didn't control the volume at all. It seemed that this mission was not some secret action. We just need to complete the mission. McGee seemed to look down on that Fowl. Arkham Town, Massachusetts. A prosperous town, an old monastery on a desert cliff. The car had already arrived in Arkham. At the exit of the station, Lizu and McGee, who were stretching lazily, walked out side by side, without any intersection. Next to the train station is the bus transfer point. It was late, and there were fewer pedestrians on the road. McGee. Before arriving at the bus stop, the companion pulled McGee's sleeve, and in the other's puzzled eyes, he pointed to the side in front to indicate. The yellow man who had been snoring and sleeping all the way was now very energetic to ask for directions. He stopped the girl in a lavender skirt, and the freckles on her face were adorable. The weirdo had a strange aura, bad, crazy, and that slightly attractive handsome face. In short, all these made him successfully strike up a conversation with the girl. Hello, how do I get to the nearest mental hospital? Arkham Asylum? The girl hesitated, the smudged blush disappeared, and her voice became stuttering. Arkham Asylum? Ah. It really feels like going home. Go home? The girl was even more scared. She pointed tremblingly in the distance. Over there is a bus that can go to Arkham Asylum. After saying that, she ran away. He's just a weirdo, we should hurry. McGee retracted his gaze and got on a shabby bus first. Although his companions still had something to say, they still followed McGee's footsteps. Lizu picked his ears, turned his head strangely, and watched the shabby bus that didn't fit in with the surroundings go farther and farther away. How come your hearing is so good? He turned his head and looked at the lavender girl running away. He scratched his chin strangely. I just asked about the asylum. I won't go back without Batman. At this time, he was definitely stating the facts. Even if the asylum was a home-like place for many lunatics, it definitely didn't mean that they wanted to go back. Friday, the dark clouds on the horizon were so thick that they couldn't be dispelled. In the morning, when I opened the window, I was greeted by a gust of wind that hurt my face. Lizu glanced at the thick clouds in the distance with a little boredom. He turned around and lay back on the thin bed. I have been in Arkham for a week, but this place is ordinary, boring. Arkham Asylum does have many strange lunatics living there. They understand the old seal, no Dagon, and even recite scriptures to Cthulhu. But after several communications, Lizu can be sure that they have become zombies, and their brains cannot accept things beyond understanding and imagination. After 2 days, Lizu simply gave up looking for interesting things in this city, and looked forward to the next world that was coming, where he could have a good fun time. Bang, bang, 2 fists hit the door, and finally a kick. Bruce, bastard. Open the door. Bruce is indeed a bastard. Lizu rolled over on his side, but had no intention of getting up and opening the door. Outside the door was the landlord of the room. Didn't you say you were a detective? Go solve some cases. People get robbed every day in this place. The 190 centimeter standard American big guy, after trying to collect rent with his fists many times, but ended up with bruises all over his face, he only dared to shout through the door. No case has ever come to me. Lizu rested his head on his left arm, crossed his legs, and had no intention of working. Outside the door fell into silence for 2 minutes. Click the sound of the key opening the door. The little giant landlord walked in and looked at the short and thin yellow man. His thighs were not as thick as his arms, but he had the strength of monster. His face was still aching. He took a deep breath and said, "Let's go to the monastery. Mr. Delaporte, who just moved in, has been troubled by rats recently. My friend, you have to consider me, right? I have a 90-year-old mother and a daughter. You have to make some money to pay the rent, right? Okay. What? You agreed?" The landlord was astonished. He didn't expect the other party to agree so readily. "Great, hurry up. It's just in the Far East, in the suburbs of Rackham Abbey. It will take half a day to get there." He pulled Lizu up from the bed and hurriedly sent him out. The reason why Lizu agreed was not because of the 40-year-old stepmother who was having an affair with Muscle Brain Sim, nor was it because of his goddaughter who was responsible for warming the bed at night. It was just because of Delaporte's strange surname. Rackham Abbey was far away from Arkham, and it was also possible that it did not belong here and there were troops stationed nearby. This also led to the fact that there were very few buses going to Rackham Abbey. The bus was shaking, and Lizu was also looking forward to something interesting. The bus stopped at the station, and the dust was flying. Rackham Abbey, a renovated building in the medieval classical style. Apart from capitalists, I really can't think of anyone who would do such meaningless things to please themselves. The doorman noticed Lizu coming. "Sir, this is private territory. I heard that Mr. Delaporte here is in trouble." He pointed to his wrist. The place covered by his sleeves could not see whether there was a watch. He just wanted to tell the doorman through this action that his time was precious. "Please come in." The doorman's attitude changed immediately, but he still looked at Lizu with a strange look. The huge monastery, or the private back garden. The newly planted vegetation here is emitting a comfortable fragrance. Meow. A cat's head popped out from the holly leaves, and it meowed at Lizu. It can be seen that it is very wary of Lizu. Meow. Meow meow. Meow. Cats are roaming around the walls, windows, and roofs of the monastery. Mr. Delaporte seems to like keeping cats very much. Lizu roughly counted them, and found that there were about 9 cats. "No," the doorman smiled bitterly and shook his head. "Sir, I can always hear mice digging in the wall recently. These cats are used to catch mice." Thank you Wrong YHR for the reward. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 116. The Man Tormented by Rats. As they were talking, they had already arrived at the reception room of the monastery. The door was open and many people could be seen standing inside, arguing and discussing something fiercely. Some people even seemed to be rolling up their sleeves and gesturing. Come to think of it, the doorman looked Lizu up and down and said with a smile, "You really don't look like a rat catcher." The man in front of him was wearing a wrinkle-free windbreaker and expensive patent leather boots. Although his shirt buttons were unbuttoned and a bit unkempt, it didn't make people feel disgusted. And the cane in his hand. The exquisite skull-shaped cane in his hand. Even the doorman could guess its high value. "Are rat catchers so concerned about their appearance now?" Lizu said. "Rat catcher? I'm not one. I'm a detective." "What?" The doorman was stunned and quickly stretched out his hand to stop him. "Wait, sir." However, Lizu had already walked into the reception room a step earlier, and the red carpet quickly left several dusty footprints, which were very eye-catching. The discussion in the reception room was buzzing like flies. Some of them were holding mouse traps, some were holding animal traps, and some were holding strange medicines, and they were arguing fiercely. "Okay, everyone." An elderly man holding a black cat and stroking its fur interrupted the noisy argument. He was wearing a shirt and a suit, and his thin face was full of fatigue. The bloodshot in his eyes was intertwined into a net. "I'm a real estate developer, as you can see, a retired real estate developer. This monastery is the legacy of my ancestors. Now I come back here, just to finish the last part of my life here, feel the breath of my ancestors, and be with them." He sat down tiredly and said, "Rackham Abbey has been renovated from the inside out, but the rats are too fierce. They have taken root in the walls of the monastery, or maybe in the foundation. His expression became vicious. Every night, they dig in the walls and run around. From the sound, they may be as big as cats, or even bigger than dogs. I'm almost driven crazy by them. Mr. Delaporte glanced at each rat catcher and said seriously, I'm not here to select a rat catcher or a rat catcher king. I hope everyone can work together to help me catch all the rats here. As long as the rats in the wall are solved, I will have enough rewards. The rat catchers who were arguing just now softened their attitudes after hearing these words. Being able to get the thank you of a rich man will be of great help to their future work. But no one wants to share their victory with others. Rather than splitting it equally, they prefer to win the final victory alone. Lizu, who was standing on the side and listening to Mr. Delaporte's words, suddenly realized that Sim, the muscle-headed man, had tricked him into coming here to catch mice. Sir, are you also a mousetrap? Old Delaporte noticed Lizu. Among a group of mousetrap, there stood a man with extraordinary bearing and extraordinary temperament, which could not be ignored. I'm a detective. I don't have any cases to solve here. Sorry. If you want me to introduce Captain Norris to you, then you don't have to waste your energy. He seemed to have seen many people who wanted to find him to help connect with the military forces. He was ready to drive people away before Lizu even introduced himself. Sir. A servant hurried in from outside. He bent over, leaned close to Delaporte's ear, and whispered something. The whisper was amplified in Lizu's ears. After the blood therapy, his body seemed to have become very different. Vision, physical strength, power, hearing, sense of smell, recovery ability, and the urge for blood. There is a problem with our store in Innsmouth. Our store was closed by the police. The Innsmouth police said that Burnham stole and even killed people. Innsmouth? The damn place. Old Draper seemed to dislike that place very much. Go find Edward. Forget it. Even if he is my son's good friend, I shouldn't keep bothering him. Moreover, we must solve all this under the watchful eyes of the law. Find a detective to investigate the situation first and see what's going on there. Such a big thing happened to the industry under his name. As an old businessman who has been in the battlefield for a long time, old Draper just frowned slightly and thought of the fastest solution. The Innsmouth police controlled everything, and they had to get some useful information before that. Old Draper stopped and looked at the man who claimed to be a detective just now. If this man claimed to be a mousetrap, he would never believe it, but if the other party claimed to be a detective, under those deep black eyes, it seems that there are really some stories that can convince him. Sir, what should I call you? He was much more polite than before. Bruce Wayne. Mr. Wayne, I'm sorry that you may not be needed to help with the rat catching work, but I have another errand that may interest you. Delaporte has an antique shop in Innsmouth. Although that fishing village is very strange, you can always get some specialties. The antique shop is also mainly responsible for purchasing some ancient and strange historical collections. He said, I don't believe that my men will steal from the public, so can you help me investigate? Innsmouth. Lizu only realized, now that he was so close to this magical town, the journey that was not in his plan seemed to be able to unfold unexpectedly. With pleasure. Innsmouth is not very friendly to people, said old Mr. Delaporte. I hope you can bring me good news tomorrow morning, Mr. Wayne. The reward will definitely satisfy you. Old Delaporte called the doorman, send Mr. Wayne back to Arkham, and compile a copy of the information about Innsmouth, and give it to Mr. Wayne. Yes. The doorman agreed with his head down. When Lizu left Rackham Abbey, the servant beside old Delaporte asked curiously, I have never heard of a detective named Bruce Wayne. If he can find out something, I will not be stingy with the reward. If not, he will not get a penny. Old Delaporte seemed to have made up his mind. And, Innsmouth, are you willing to go? No, I will just stay by your side, sir. The servant shook his head vigorously. Who would be willing to go to that weird fishing village that believes in cults in Innsmouth? Just listening to those stories is enough to make people's hearts skip a few beats. I heard that there are several famous detectives in the local area. Entrust them to check it out. We should not expect a yellow-skinned detective to help us find out anything useful. The servant left with the order. His previous arrangement was just to find an excuse to drive Lizu away. Whether it succeeded or not, there was no one to stop him from catching mice, right? Old Delaporte cleared his throat and said, "Everyone, I hope that after tonight, I will see a field of dead rats." Chapter 117 Bus to Innsmouth. Sir, these are the documents. The documents handed over were more like a piece of paper, so simple that Lizu only glanced at the paper and understood what old Draper meant. "You don't understand Innsmouth either?" He could sense that old Draper was looking for a scapegoat. "I don't understand. I've seen people from Innsmouth, and I heard that Innsmouth is their hometown." The doorman of old Draper, who was sitting in the driver's seat, looked at Lizu in surprise, as if he couldn't understand why he had to know those monsters. "Do you have money?" "Sir, the reward needs to be paid after you have investigated the Draper antique store in Innsmouth." Change for the bus. Lizu thought that he was the worst bastard in Gotham, and he was so poor that he didn't have money for the bus. "Yes." The doorman hesitated and took out a few bills from his pocket. It was hard to tell that he was rich at such a young age. Lizu pushed open the car door and got out of the car. He glanced at the panel in front of him, and the countdown was 72 hours. He looked up again and looked up at the sky. It was noon, but the sky in Arkham was extremely gloomy. It seemed as if a big pot was hanging in the sky, covering Arkham and making people breathless. A storm was announcing its arrival. At the bus stop, there were a few destinations written on the sign. Lizu glanced at it without interest and finally found his destination, Innsmouth. The shabby yellow bus, separated from the other buses, was parked alone on the side and was excluded. There was a newspaper on the left side of the car window, going around the back of the car, although there was no newspaper blocking the right side. The yellow mud stuck on the window still successfully prevented people from looking inside. Lizu walked around to the door and reached out to knock on the door gently. "Come in." The person who spoke seemed to have a sock in his mouth. Lizu had seen this weird accent in EOD. He opened the door of the bus. The driver, who was from Innsmouth, had grey skin and dull eyes. He sat there hunched over, staring at Lizu quietly. Lizu opened his legs and stepped on the bus. The whole bus screamed under the heavy load. An Innsmouth symptom stared at the smiling man for more than 10 seconds before the Innsmouth driver said, "Leave at 3 in the afternoon." Lizu walked to the back seat of the bus, leaned against the window, and observed the not so boring Arkham through the gaps in the newspaper from this unique perspective. Time moved hard to 3 in the afternoon, and the sky got darker. The Innsmouth driver set off on time. The old bus was shaking, and the spring rod holding the rear door broke. As the broken bus bumped forward, it opened and closed with a creaking sound. The bus left Arkham and headed towards a remote road. The driver glanced at Lizu through the rear-view mirror in the car, but found that, when he looked at him, he was looking at him with a smile. He didn't know what was going on in his throat, and the snoring sound was very loud. Bumping, dirt road, and getting darker sky. Looking through the gaps in the newspaper, it seemed as if he was leaving the civilized world and heading for an indescribable world. It was completely dark, and it was already around 8 o'clock in the evening. After struggling to climb over the narrow dirt road by the sea, the old bus finally arrived at this backward and mysterious town of Innsmouth. The town still maintains the architectural style of the last century, and no new houses have been built recently. Every household turned off the lights, but there were constant sounds coming out. Among them, there were several strange roars that sounded very familiar. Fortunately, it was not a wasted trip. He seemed to be relieved. The car stopped at the square in Innsmouth. The streets of Innsmouth town are interconnected, but the alleys are crowded. There is a stone statue in the middle of the square. Perhaps it is a great man of a certain era, but the stone head of the great man has moved, leaving only the body standing. After getting off the car, the old driver ignored Lizu. Hotel. Lizu looked at the hotel in front of him. There was no doubt that this must be a place where he could rest well tonight, and riding in a car was also very physically demanding. As for the report that old Draper said about tomorrow, Lizu had already forgotten it. Innsmouth town was his interest. It was not until Lizu walked into the hotel that the Innsmouth looking boss raised his head and said impatiently, "No room available." He said impatiently, "Go to another place." He seemed to be chasing away flies. The rejection of outsiders was exactly the same as that of the residents of Oakmont. Lee Zhu walked out of the hotel and smiled at the bus parked next to him. He believed that the Innsmouth driver could see it. There were few people on the street. People seemed to be hiding at home. There are quite a few people. He noticed that the people of Innsmouth did not seem to be arrested by the so-called police as written in the newspaper. This is in the United States, and the British police came to arrest them? Lee Zhu recalled the newspaper in his room on the Charon. In the newspaper in 1920, the British police arrested a large number of Innsmouth residents. He was curious about this matter at the time. Not all people here look like Innsmouth. There are also many normal people. They walk tremblingly on the road. When they see Lee Zhu, a foreigner, they hide far away, fearing that they will have any intersection with him. Here, the people of Innsmouth are in power unlike in Oakmont. In that small town, the people of Innsmouth are oppressed and excluded by the locals, but in Innsmouth, they become the upper class who oppress others. This is the real world. He prefers this world to the utopia of the witch town. Having said that, Lee Zhu still has to run around for his own accommodation. Without exception, all hotels are full. Don't be sneaky. The policeman with Innsmouth appearance blocked Lee Zhu's way. Foreigner. This is my territory. I won't let you mess around. I was hired by the Draper family to investigate the situation of his antique shop. His men embezzled and disappeared. Finding the local police to understand the situation is much faster than exploring by yourself. However, in the detective industry, Lee Zhu's performance can't really be called wise. Detectives should hide well and investigate in secret. That belongs to ordinary detectives. Innsmouth, which is related to Dagon, has long lost the meaning of secret investigation. I don't care about Draper. The expression of the Innsmouth policeman did not change. Perhaps it was difficult for his damp and stiff fish face to make any complex expressions. His protruding fish eyes stared at Lee Zhu. Leave Innsmouth quickly, before I arrest you for theft. Just as he said, he has the final say in this place, and so does the law. Of course, Lee Zhu raised his hands, indicating to the other party that he would never meddle in other people's business. After the Innsmouth policeman snorted disdainfully and turned around, Lee Zhu jumped up, used his hands and feet, and easily climbed to the roof behind the Innsmouth policeman. The no passing sign blocked the street behind, and the Draper antique shop was on that street, with a seal. Chapter 118, Innsmouth Town Story. HMM. The Innsmouth police officer turned his head, his grey eyes filled with doubt. The street behind him was empty. Did the stranger disappear in a second or two? Mumbling something in a weird tone, the Innsmouth police officer continued to patrol the streets. His main patrol area was around the Draper antique shop. Lee Zhu moved lightly on the roof, and his thick soled leather boots did not cause much trouble for his movement. With a leap, he spanned a distance of more than 3 meters. And he only needed to squat halfway and sink his knees slightly to remove the gravity of jumping from the second floor. After taking a look at the antique shop door with a seal, Lee Zhu chose a safer way. He walked around the door and came to the back door of the antique shop. The door was locked. Toyization where the palm touches, the locked door turns into a toy. Gently push open the toy door. It is the storage room at the back. No antiques are missing. Lee Zhu checked the numbers on the boxes. The so-called information of Old Draper was the numbers of the antiques in the antique shop. It was most important to find out how much property he had lost as soon as possible. No antiques were missing. It seems that Burnham did not embezzle, but just disappeared out of thin air. Lee Zhu sat on the chair and suddenly thought of Charles Reed. When investigating a case, that guy's ability was like flipping through the correct answers directly. Innsmouth people are not just weird looking. He recalled the roar coming from a certain building when he first entered Innsmouth. Click in front, the door of the antique shop opened. 2 policemen walked in. The stranger disappeared. The one who spoke was the Innsmouth policeman who had stopped Lee Zhu just now. As soon as I turned my head, he disappeared. He came for this shabby antique shop. Those businessmen are really mentally ill, another policeman mocked. For meaningless things like money, compared to our great ideas, they are really ridiculous. Ha ha ha. His silly laughter was also very interesting. No wonder the 2 Innsmouth police searched the entire room, but unfortunately, they failed to find Lee Zhu, who was stuck to the corner of the wall above their heads. The police closed the door and left, and Lee Zhu landed easily. He stared at his palm in surprise, and his body seemed to be getting stronger. Blood. Lizu's nose twitched, and he smelled a smell in the air that could stimulate his nerves. He could feel the blood impulse belonging to the mad chaos branch in his body, driving him forward. In the basement, the locked basement door turned into a toy and was gently pulled open, but nothing could stop him. A pool of blood that had not yet dried, and there were terrible claw marks on the ground, which seemed to be a beast like a lion. The owner of the beast and the blood left here not long ago. Strangely, there were beasts and people fighting in the basement, but the two policemen outside with keen senses did not notice it. Or did they notice it and pretend not to notice it? It's getting more and more interesting. The people of Innsmouth are hiding some secrets, and in the remaining 60 hours, he may reveal the secret. It is human instinct to explore the unknown, not to mention that this exploration also has rewards. Who can refuse? It only took 20 minutes for Lizu to calmly open the door and walk out of the antique shop. Just as he turned the corner, he happened to run into the Innsmouth police. He scratched the back of his head, not understanding where Lizu suddenly came out. Don't wander around, outsider. If you make weird moves on my territory and dare to go against me, I will definitely throw you into jail. He didn't hide his threats at all. In Innsmouth, he is the law. I understand, Mr. Policeman. Lizu nodded humbly and respectfully, but when he lowered his head, his smile covered by his slightly long black hair became more brilliant. The police, who had no way to deal with the outsider in front of him, finally let him go. Turning to alleys, he walked deeper. This town has many alleys, which is a great terrain to avoid being tracked. There is someone in front of him. Snort. Someone is graffitiing on the wall. A short-haired woman wearing a short skirt and spraying on the wall with a spray in her right hand. She didn't seem to notice Lizu behind her, or maybe she had already noticed him, but just didn't bother to pay attention to him. She continued to spray paint on the wall. A 5-pointed star, and then an eye. Old seal. The woman had a pair of special eyes similar to Erica's. This is not a place you can come to. This town is very hostile to outsiders. I suggest you leave here as soon as possible. She pointed to the old seal behind her. If you get into any trouble, the things I painted on the wall may help you. Lizu looked at the old seal on the wall, nodded, and turned away. Don't do too many strange things in Innsmouth. They are always watching you, the woman finally advised. Although Innsmouth is not prosperous at night, there is a bar that is open, and there is a drunk old drunkard at the door of the bar. He howled strangely in the corner of the wall and didn't care about the Innsmouth people passing by. The Innsmouth people seemed to have no way to deal with this old drunkard, but just paid more attention to Lizu. Are there any wine? The old drunkard raised his eyelids and looked at Lizu with one eye. I worked in Old Lady Vaughan's orphanage for 37 years, and before that I worked in a fish cannery. I grew up in Innsmouth. Give me some wine to moisten my throat first, and then we can talk about other things. Lizu would never refuse someone who made him feel interesting, and he was very curious about the situation in Innsmouth. There was a bar behind him, so there was always no shortage of strong liquor. Seeing the wine, the old drunkard's expression changed to surprise. He snatched the wine, rinsed his mouth with the wine, swallowed it, and drank a few mouthfuls with gulps, and half a bottle of wine went down his throat. Burp. His stomach swelled, and he burped, and the old drunkard closed his eyes with satisfaction. Lizu waited by his side from beginning to end without urging him. Burp. After another burp, the old drunkard began to speak. What do you want to ask? Did the British police arrest people from Innsmouth not long ago? Not long ago? Even if the police came here, they would be restrained, not to mention coming from the sea. The old drunkard curled his lips. I have lived here since I was a child. If you didn't read the date of the newspaper wrong, but the police did come here. Lizu's question seemed to touch upon the memory sealed in his mind. Or maybe he just drank too much and wanted to talk about the past. Maybe you think I'm crazy, just like those brats in Arkham and Ipswich, but I've eaten more salt than you've eaten rice. It all started with Captain Abed, who persuaded the desperate villagers to believe in a more powerful god who could answer everyone's prayers. The Christians captured Abed's followers and shot them on the rocks, and then threw Abed and his followers into prison. At that time in Innsmouth, Christians still had the final say. The compiled story you read may have been adapted from the story at that time. Chapter 119. Ramona's Angry Mother. Then after a few weeks of silence, the 46 people came back and wanted to start a riot, and then they saw them, swarming them. Alcohol couldn't hide the fear in the old drunkard's eyes. Just the memory could make his face turn blue. He took a few gulps of wine to catch his breath. Countless. He tried to count the number of those monsters in his memory, but he failed. It was a massacre. The prison door was opened, and the dead and the not quite dead were piled up into a mountain. The whole town square was filled with gunshots, screams, and shouts. The next day, a bed took control of the entire Innsmouth, and warned everyone not to gossip with outsiders. He said a lot in one breath, took another sip of wine, and looked at Lizu, whose expression had not changed much. Do you think I'm talking nonsense? I was young at that time, very young. Not like now I'm an old fool. My memory is still good. Lizu has always lacked interest in ancient stories. The reason why stories are stories is that they lack authenticity. When they are passed on by word of mouth, people's brains will process them. The old drunkard continued. The old captain was seduced deeper and deeper by those evil gods, and they were thirsty for more sacrifices. The old captain said that they must swear the oath of Dagon. His words stopped abruptly. After a bottle of strong liquor, the old drunkard's ankles became soft, and he simply sat on the ground, humming and moaning, obviously completely drunk. Dagon. Lizu finally heard the name he was looking forward to. He knew very little about Dagon, only that Dagon was the god believed by the people of Innsmouth. From the story of the old drunkard, Dagon seemed to be an evil god. I'm going to sleep for a while. If you want to know something else, Thomas over there in the house knows more than I do. He is in pain now, and he has a lot to tell you. It's better to find a foreigner who can go out to ask for a letter instead of always writing letters that can't be sent out. From what he said, it seems that there are people here who share the same suffering as him and are oppressed by the people of Innsmouth. The old drunkard also wanted Lizu to help him so that both sides could get what they needed. Hulu, the old drunkard had fallen asleep with his drunken eyes open. There are always more people hiding in the narrow alleys of Innsmouth than on the streets. The Innsmouth man with a rolled eye was gesturing with the rubber stick in his hand, threatening the frightened woman. Don't gossip with outsiders. You know how powerful the Dagon cult is. Yes. The woman nodded timidly and did not move in the face of the threat of the ugly guy. The Innsmouth man noticed Lizu coming from a distance, snorted coldly and closed his mouth. Remember. When passing by Lizu, the Innsmouth man glanced at Lizu with his protruding eyes like fish eyes. I have seen your relatives in Oakmont, and there are also a group of Innsmouth people there, Lizu said to the Innsmouth man. Speaking of which, his relationship with the Innsmouth man is not bad, and the two sides have had cooperative relations many times. It can also be said to be a mutually beneficial relationship. Never heard of it. Outsider, this is not the place you should come to. The Innsmouth man turned his head stiffly. How do I get to Thomas's house? He asked. The Innsmouth man's expression changed a little. Outsider, don't meddle in other people's business. There is no problem here. After leaving a fierce threat, he left quickly. Maybe talking to outsiders will make him sick. Lizu's eyes naturally turned to the trembling woman. I don't know anything. She stepped back again and again. How do I get to Thomas's house? Lizu asked patiently. The influencer aura exerted its power to soothe her fearful and nervous nerves. In front after a while, she stretched out her hand and pointed the way. Thank you. At the end of the alley, there is a 2-story house with an attic. The house has been in disrepair for a long time, and the wooden doorposts have the unique dampness of this small town. The carpet at the door was washed very clean. The owner of this house seemed to live in poverty, but he had his own rules. At least the smell at the door was much better than that of other Innsmouth residents. The one who opened the door was a girl with 2 braids as high as Lizu's chest. Her eyes were grey and her skin was grey, but she looked very cute, like an exquisite doll. Her eyes proved that she also had Innsmouth blood. Little friend, I'm looking for Thomas. Lizu grinned. The ugly appearance of Innsmouth people, sometimes with the smell of stinky salted fish, tortured people's noses and eyes, but the appearance of this girl seemed to be an accident. Dad is not at home. He seems to have gone out to get something. My name is Ramona. Ramona showed a sweet smile, warm enough to melt ice. Please come in and wait. He will be back soon. Are you Dad's friend? Ramona stared at Lizu curiously, and the cane in his hand. This is the first time she has seen such a delicate thing for a noble lord. No, I just want to talk to him. Do you live alone with Dad? Lizu was standing in the living room. On the table, he saw a family photo. A torn family photo. There were only Ramona and a man, who should be Thomas. The many things to talk about that the old drunk had said. Thomas, in the photo, looked like a gentle and thin man, and he was powerless. Live with mom too. Ramona was already lying on the carpet, flipping through a book. That should be the book Thomas read, with dense English letters, which made people feel overwhelmed at a glance. Mom is too fierce, Ramona said. She always smashes things like that, and Dad can only lock her in the attic. That's terrible. Well, Ramona was used to it, just flipping through things she couldn't understand at all. Bang, bang. There was a noise upstairs. Something was hitting the door. The sound was loud. It didn't sound like a human noise. It's Mom, Ramona said indifferently. This sound doesn't sound like a woman's sound. Lizu was a little alert. He stood up and walked up the wooden stairs quickly. His right hand, which was holding the skeleton cane, trembled slightly. A strange premonition told him that something bad was happening upstairs. On the second floor, he faced a wide open room with a lamp shining on the table. Men's clothes were hung on the wall. It was Thomas' room. Dung. In the attic. He came to the attic, but only saw a locked room. The mother that Ramona mentioned should be locked here. Or thick iron chain locking the door also represented the determination of Thomas. Ramona's mother seemed to have noticed Lizu's arrival and actually quieted down. There was only one small window in the attic room, and Lizu looked inside through the window. Bang! The iron door was hit violently. Taking advantage of this time, Lizu also saw the appearance of Ramona's irritable mother. She was not a crazy woman, but a complete deep diver. Chapter 120 Shadow. At this moment, Lizu was a piece of meat that exuded a unique smell, attracting the crazy irritable mother of Ramona. What a great discovery. Lizu gently turned his wrist, and the skull cane rotated in his palm, and he changed into a sword holding posture. The Innsmouth people became deep divers, an extremely interesting discovery. Raw. It is still unknown whether deep divers have intelligence similar to that of humans like ghouls, but the crazy deep divers at this time have terrifying strength. X@X. There are strange fish eyes in the air. What Lizu can catch is only short syllables similar to the pronunciation of Dagon. The air has also become a little humid. The deep divers are getting more and more manic, and their sharp claws scratch the iron door with a creaking sound. Do you really want to come out? Lizu touched the iron door with his left hand, and the iron door quickly turned into a toy. Then let you come out. The plastic door was vulnerable under the claws of the deep divers. The deep one roared at Lizu, and the hind legs with fine grey-green scales exerted force, ejected and pounced at Lizu's face. Deng deng. Lizu took 2 steps back to avoid the deep one's attack, and quickly stretched out his left hand, taking a half step to press on the deep one's arm. With the support of the deep one's arm, he pulled his body up from the ground and jumped lightly like a robin flying in the sky. The skeleton cane in his right hand had clicked, broken one by one, and easily wrapped around the deep one's neck. Raw. The deep one wanted to turn around, but it only caused the iron chain around his neck to tighten suddenly. Dung. The deep one's body fell to the ground, with a huge gap on his neck. Just arrived at someone else's house. You killed someone's wife. This is too rude. Lizu took back the cane, leaned on the ground, and looked at the deep one's body on the ground. There were footsteps on the wooden stairs. God bless you. The man fell to his knees with a plop. Looking at the corpse on the ground, he was not sad, but ecstatic. It was Thomas. In the torn family photo, he was hugging Ramona, very happy. This monster, it's finally dead. Tears flashed in the corners of his eyes, and his eyes looking at Lizu were full of gratitude. Is it your wife? Lizu half squatted and said, it looks very special. It wasn't like this before. She. Thomas looked at the corpse on the ground, relieved, but full of nostalgia. She is the most beautiful girl I have ever seen. We met at Arkham University. We fell in love. She said she couldn't leave Innsmouth. For love, I followed her and stayed here. Dad? Ramona asked cautiously downstairs. It's Mom. What's wrong? No, baby, nothing happened, Thomas responded. Thank you for killing it. Maybe this is also a relief for it. Thomas said anxiously, they are coming soon. You should leave here quickly. They will never let any outsider go. I have been suffering and I have no ability to help her get rid of it. Thank you, Mr. Outsider. This matter. Dad, someone is looking for you. Ramona's voice downstairs interrupted Thomas's words. Lovely little Ramona, I don't know how many stupid boys she will attract when she grows up. The unique Innsmouth pronunciation that was mumbling in her mouth also came from downstairs. Those locals are here. Ramona, stay at my house for a few days first. I want to talk to your father about something. No, I want to live with my father. I want to be with my father. Ramona's voice was getting farther and farther away. It seemed that she was forcibly taken away. In the attic, Thomas, who heard his daughter being taken away, felt relieved. That's good, sir. He smiled at Lizu. Thank you very much, but you'd better leave now. Even if you have the power to kill it, you can never fight against them. This is Innsmouth, by the sea. Someone was climbing the stairs. A group of people. Leave, sir. Thomas had to stop what he was about to say again. Lizu left through the small window of the attic. The skills from the top acrobats made it as easy as breathing. He hung outside the window, holding the window with one hand, and did not leave. The strong physical strength gained after the blood treatment allowed him to stay in this posture for a long time. There were quarrels in the attic, but more questions. Damn it, Thomas, you actually killed your wife with your own hands. I will send you to the gallows. Listening to the voice, it was the Innsmouth policeman. Treat Ramona well. Thomas did not argue, but just said softly, she is one of us. Of course we will take good care of her. A few minutes later, the footsteps disappeared, the door downstairs opened, and the Innsmouth people took Thomas and carried the body of the deep diver away. This is a town where the Innsmouth people have everything under their control. Lizu watched the group of Innsmouth people leave. Sacrifice is inevitable, and Lizu will never refuse anyone's kind sacrifice. The room under his feet was Thomas' room. After releasing his hand, Lizu naturally jumped into Thomas' room. There was a letter on the table. My wife has turned into that kind of thing. She didn't just lose her beautiful looks or all her hair. She has completely turned into a monster, including her mind. As far as I know, every Innsmouth person will be like that. I really want to help her get rid of it, but I don't have the power. Ramona has Innsmouth blood. She is so cute now, like an angel. But she has begun to show Innsmouth characteristics. Maybe in just a few years, she will become ugly, turn into that kind of monster, and eventually lose her human rationality. Maybe I should kill Ramona before she completely turns into that kind of thing, help her get rid of it, and then stay away from the damn town of Innsmouth, and start my own life from then on. I admit that I can't do it. Now I just want to wait for Ramona to grow up, and then leave, and accompany her when she completely turns into a beast. This is also the last thing I can do as a father. I may die one day. I hope the recipient of this letter is not a damn Innsmouth person. Lizu picked up the letter paper. The recipient read, Edward Darby, and the mailing address is Arkham University. But Lizu's mind was not on the weird poet writer in Arkham at this time. He was now annoyed that he had made a wasted trip. Just after walking out of Thomas's house, a figure blocked Lizu's way. Or maybe she happened to spray the old seal in the alley and happened to meet Lizu. It was the short-haired woman who had sprayed the old seal on the wall before. You're in trouble. She was like a bystander, as if she knew the ins and outs of what had just happened. Leave Innsmouth. This place is not suitable for people with strong curiosity. Thank you for the advice. Lizu bowed slightly. He still had a new place to go. Investigating the missing men of Old Delapole was his main task, at least on the surface. But it's better to go back and sleep now. Lizu stretched, showing his carefree attitude towards this gloomy town, filled with sea fog. Madman. The woman turned and left quickly. The figure of the woman leaving in a hurry seemed to indicate that she also had her own purpose. Everyone who comes to Innsmouth has his or her own purpose. Chapter 121 Staying at Innsmouth. 11:39. It was late at night. The sea breeze in Innsmouth was cold, blowing through the narrow and winding alleys, as sharp as a knife, making people who went out late at night shiver. The wind was strong, but it couldn't blow away the thick fog covering the head. It couldn't blow away the shadows on the heads and minds of the people living here. Walking back, Lisa could clearly feel the change in the attitude of the people in Innsmouth towards him, from rejection to malice. The people in Innsmouth were originally repellent to outsiders. If Lizu hadn't been able to clearly perceive the malice, it would have been difficult to find anything on that stiff face. In response, Lizu laughed. The hotel, the shabby bus was still parked on the side of the road, waiting to set off again late at night. The driver was hunched over and whispered with the hotel owner at the front desk. They didn't notice Lizu standing outside the hotel door. But that's right. Who would have thought that someone could stand outside the door 5 or 6 meters away and still hear people whispering? Thomas' family has a problem. Some people say that before that, the old drunk showed the way to the stranger. In the closed town, the news was like the wind in the thick fog, flowing faster than Lizu's feet, and faster than the clumsy feet of the people of Innsmouth who seemed to have webbed feet. Lizu walked all the way back, but he was not as fast as their whispers. These strangers always like to make trouble. The hotel owner said, "We have to keep him here. I'll tell him that the engine of the car is broken," said the old driver of Innsmouth. "He has to stay here." He couldn't help but laugh strangely. From the conversation, it seems that they did this for the first time. Creak. Lizu opened the door at the right time. "Oh, that's bad," Lizu said in annoyance. "I don't want to sleep on the street. There is no other place for me to stay. Fortunately, I caught the last bus. I'm afraid I have to trouble you again, Mr. Driver." And the smile on his face was like a spectator who was waiting for what kind of funny behavior the two clowns in front of him would use to please him. "The engine of the car is broken." The driver said the lines he had prepared long ago, but the expression of the stranger in front of him made him feel a little uncomfortable. "Really? That's terrible." Lizu turned his eyes to the innkeeper, as if to say, "It's your turn to perform next. You're lucky. There's a room. Come with me." The innkeeper took out the key from the counter. "Yes, I've always been lucky." He agreed with this. Lizu followed the innkeeper upstairs. The hotel was large enough, and the corridor was wide enough for 5 people to walk side by side at the same time, as if it was deliberately built to allow some large animals to pass through. There were not many lights in the corridor. It was very dim, and many corners were covered by shadows. Lizu scanned the surrounding walls, the dried blood stains, especially the cracks in the door, and he was even too lazy to clean them up. People who came to Oakmont with curiosity seemed to have the same fate in this hotel. That might be Lizu's final fate. And along the way, the whole floor, there were no guests. "Your room, here is the key." The innkeeper handed over the key, which had a strong fishy smell. After the innkeeper gave Lizu the key, he turned around and left, without any intention of disturbing him. The room was spacious, with a wardrobe, and the toilet and bathroom were separated. There was also a single bed. The window was open, facing the factory area on the east side of the town, with rows of iron roofs in full view. After closing the door and blocking it with the wardrobe, Lizu lay on the bed, as if waiting for a scheduled program, with his eyes open. At 1 a.m., the moonlight tried to tear through the thick fog and sprinkled in through the window. Footsteps were heard, and there were whispers. "Is he asleep? He must be asleep." It was the chat of 2 Innsmouth people who were approaching Lizu's room step by step. Someone was taking out the keys, comparing them one by one, and the clattering sound was very loud. Click, the door lock was opened, but they tried to push the door open, but failed. Damn it. The Innsmouth people no longer hid and concealed. They howled and banged on the door hard. Again and again, the empty wardrobe was knocked to the ground by the heavy force. Damn stranger. The old driver of Innsmouth, holding a crowbar, rushed towards Lizu. Puff, the tip of the stick entered from the chest and came out from the back. Lizu stepped on the fallen body of Innsmouth and slowly pulled out the stick, which also took away the last bit of strength of the driver of Innsmouth. The hotel owner was in his prime. He waved it randomly and pressed towards Lizu without any rules. A short stick, no matter how sharp it was, could it still stab him in the face of a strong attack? This is what the hotel owner thought. Lizu, who was standing in front of him, took 2 steps back and waved his stick at him from a distance of 2 meters. A string of ferocious fangs, reflecting the moonlight, knocked the hotel owner down. Another footsteps were heard. Kill this stranger. The Innsmouth people who rushed upstairs were still very young and did not have many strange features. Some of them carried machetes and some held shotguns. With 3 or 4 shotguns pointed at his head, Lizu had no choice but to run away. He flew out of the hotel window, leaping between eaves, walls, and roofs. Finally, Lizu landed on the roof of a tall building on the edge of the town and successfully got rid of the Innsmouth people who were chasing him. I thought you could be more interesting. Lizu leaned out to look. A few hours ago, the town was dead silent, but now it was filled with roars. No matter the streets or alleys, there were Innsmouth people and flashlights. The martial law town of Innsmouth seemed to be more lively. Lizu was in the mood to make fun of the situation in front of him. Standing on the edge of the town, looking into the distance, there was a dark reef on the sea, with several deep divers on it. They seemed to have received some signal and rushed over here. Maybe our gal friends especially like these small fish in the sea. Lizu was about to pour out the monsters of the entire gal kingdom and flood the town. Ah! The woman's cry of pain caught his attention. It was the short-haired woman. She was caught by 2 Innsmouth men, and her pistol was also taken away. Snap! Snap! The iron whip exploded, and the Innsmouth man was whipped away and died. Ha! The woman raised her head and looked at the person who saved her. Thank you. As she spoke, her eyes stayed on the whip-like metal weapon in Lizu's hand. She watched as Lizu lifted it lightly, and the iron whip quickly shrank and combined into a cane. She moved her eyes away from the magical weapon and moved to Lizu's face. Those Innsmouth people are crazy, and we outsiders will all die. Come with me. She made a prompt decision. As outsiders, they must help each other to survive. Wait. Lizu walked to the body of the Innsmouth man and the puzzled eyes of the woman, bent down and picked up the woman's pistol. He had no intention of returning the gun. After a simple check of the bullets, he said, "Let's go." Chapter 122 Belika's sister and story. I'm Belika. The short-haired woman introduced herself. Bruce Lizu seemed to be addicted to this name. My father studies occultism and history. I found the old seals I used to deal with those monsters by flipping through his books, but it seems that bullets are more useful against these monsters. Belika said, we must leave today. The implication was that the two should help each other to leave. My father has a good relationship with the former local priest. He has a secret passage here to leave here, Belika said anxiously, but he didn't notice that Lizu was just yawning. Compared with the Gotham police's pursuit and roundup, the pursuit and roundup in Innsmouth town is completely the difference between Boy Scouts and Marine Corps, which is difficult to force him to be interested. Belika tiptoed in front to lead the way, and Lizu followed behind him. At this moment, he wanted to tell a joke, to liven up the atmosphere. If only he could laugh at this joke. Damn it, you're wearing leather boots. Not long after walking out, Belika frowned and turned back to glare at Lizu. The pair of patent leather boots that looked like they were made with extraordinary workmanship made clear click, click sounds in the quiet alley. They're here. Before Belika could continue his accusation, the Innsmouth pursuers had already rushed over following the sound of Lizu's leather boots. Innsmouth town is located in a remote area with few policemen and guns. Therefore, most of the people who surrounded them had farm tools, kitchen knives, and few hot weapons. The downside was that the two were surrounded in a circle, unable to move forward or backward. Lizu stood in place, his left hand holding the pistol hanging in the seam of his pants, and his shoulders twisted slightly. Measure, compare, swing your elbow, and your wrist will reach the angle you calculated mentally 30 degrees. Shoot, bang, no matter the result. Turning around, the tall man from Innsmouth gently moved his wrist upwards 2 degrees and fired. The recoil of the gun body caused his wrist to shake, and Lizu's hand really followed the recoil and turned 30 degrees and fired. He leaned back and fired 2 shots in a row. Bang, 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 bang. Belika stood there, listening to the gunshots, watching the man next to him use his magical shooting skills to take away the lives of the people from Innsmouth who surrounded him in an instant. He did not aim, but just made strange movements with his body. With that movement, the bullet could hit the position he had planned in his mind, and this position was exactly the same. A few cheers and wonderful battles ended. The people from Innsmouth were like blooming flowers, their bodies were on the ground, forming a circle, and blood was blooming. Lizu's eyes burned with madness, and his smile became even more uncontrollable. The blood in the air stimulated his nerves. Hurry, it's time to go. Bilika seemed to have noticed his abnormality, and dragged him away quickly. Patent leather boots stepped on bloodstains, and the bloody footprints went farther and farther in the moonlit alley. It was already the fourth wave of people who discovered them. Bilika sighed. This escape journey was completely different from what she had imagined. Rather than escaping, it was more like killing all the obstacles along the way, and forcing her way out of a bloody road. Looking at the police holding a shotgun in front of her, she just squatted down with her head in her arms and huddled up. Through the previous few battles, Bilika found that only by minimizing her size as much as possible can she cause unnecessary trouble. Lizu also had a shotgun in his hand, which came from the collection of an old Innsmouth resident. Judging from the degree of paint peeling on the muzzle, perhaps the history of this gun can be traced back a few years. It was still a pincer attack from the front and back. Fighting with the locals in Innsmouth town, it was easy for the other side to use the geographical advantage to surround them, so that outsiders would be trapped in the encirclement and could only close their eyes and wait for death. Lizu shouldered the shotgun. The muzzle was facing backwards, and his finger pulled the trigger. Bang! Iron sand sprayed out like mist, but his right hand had already loaded the bullet again. Like playing with nunchakus, his left hand passed through the right armpit and grabbed the barrel. Bang! Another shot, and his right hand went to the left armpit again to grab the gun. The huge recoil of the gun shook his body, but the sparks and black mist sprayed out accurately sprayed the people of Innsmouth. Bang! 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 In a flash, the battle was over. Bilika stood up and skillfully grabbed the hand of the weirdo beside him. I'm fine. His eyes turned. He didn't want to drink blood, but when facing the spraying blood, it was difficult to suppress the excitement of his spirit. The church is just in front of us. Bilika was still thinking, with this person next to them, do they still need to escape? Raw. There were black shadows moving on the wall. 1, 2, 3, more than a dozen. It's those things. Bilika immediately dispelled his ridiculous idea. No matter how powerful the weirdo was, it was difficult to escape the category of human. Those things were no longer human. They stumbled back into the church. Innsmouth people also have the habit of worshipping. The stained glass on the wall is a monster with octopus tentacles, human form, and bat wings on its back. The cross was replaced by a statue of a Deep One. The legendary Dagon seems to have a lot to do with the Deep One. Here, boom. The Deep One has caught up and is hitting the church door. Quick. Bilika led the way. They walked to the back of the statue of the Deep One and stopped in front of a piece of glass. The face of the Deep One was still on the glass, huge, ugly and hideous. Would the people of Innsmouth believe in a Deep One? Unless Dagon is a Deep One. The glass was equipped with hidden hinges and was gently pushed open. The believers who believed in Dagon racked their brains, but could not imagine that there was a different world behind the father god they admired. The two entered the hidden space, crouched down and walked through the long corridor. In the narrow room, decorated with a cross, Bilika exhaled heavily. We can rest here for a while, and go out when it's light. She relaxed a lot. The space was a little quiet. Bilika was with this man. There was no ambiguous atmosphere of a single man and a single woman. Instead, it was filled with a strong sense of discomfort. The quieter it was, the stronger the feeling became. I have a sister, she said, breaking the silence. She has covered her face with a voice mask since she was a child. My father told me that she was a little different. We were not close. I didn't even know what she looked like except her name. But she came home some time ago and took off her mask. She was so beautiful. She was really tall and had a good figure. Bilika's expression gradually became sad as she recalled. The moon was beautiful that night. If sisters can hold Zyodian and chat all night, they must be very happy. So I went to find her with Zyodian. Her expression changed, but I only saw blood on the ground, torn clothes, smashed furniture, and a silver-haired werewolf. Oh my god, there really is such a monster in the world. My father shot it with a gun, but it also killed my father. I hid in the corner and escaped. Bilika gritted her teeth. I came to Innsmouth because I knew this place was full of mysteries from my father's notes. Maybe, if I investigate enough mysteries about the world, I can find the werewolf again, and kill it to avenge my sister and father. But, I didn't expect it to turn out like this in the end. She laughed helplessly. After Belika finished her story, she found that Lizu was just yawning against the wall out of boredom. Belika even suspected that Lizu didn't listen to a word. This is the map to leave Innsmouth before the air became quiet again. Belika took the lead in taking action. She pulled out a map of Innsmouth, which marked the shortcuts that could quickly leave the city. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 123, The Book of Dagon. Squeak. A bristly grey mouse crawled over the high heels, leaving a disgusting stain with bristles sticky with dirty water. Snap. The owner of the high heels kicked the disgusting prank away with a fierce kick of his calf. The face in the shadow must be full of disgust. Tick, tick. The sound of stinky water seeping out from the pipe above the head and falling into the ditch. Turn right at the intersection ahead and go another 3 miles and we can escape Innsmouth. Belika wrinkled his nose and compared the map. The shortcut left by his father is located below the town of Innsmouth. That is, the sewer. After waiting for a while without hearing a response, Belika turned around and looked at Lizu and found that his attention was completely on the secret book of cults. Lizu didn't even raise his head. Should we rush out directly? Belika recalled the man's powerful fighting ability. It was too suffocating to walk through the sewer. Maybe he should just let him fight his way out directly? Fortunately, Belika still had his sanity. Although the individual combat power of the deep divers in Innsmouth was terrifying, the real horror was that they were close to the sea. In the sea that could not be seen clearly, the deep divers watched the world across the water. Killing them was impossible. Facing the sea, humans would only be drowned. It happened that Lizu's attention was completely focused on the Book of Dagon in his hand at this time, and he had no interest in breaking through the siege. The secret book that the Innsmouth people used to promote their doctrines contained distorted and unrecognizable texts, which should only exist in dreams. Only when humans are free-spirited and not constrained by the so-called common sense in their dreams, can they barely accept such strange texts. If they want to understand these texts, the price they pay must be that their heads cannot bear this knowledge, and their entire brains are shocked into a paste by the terrible knowledge. Dagon's Oath. Lizu flipped through 2 more pages of the book. Compared to reading the English letters on the Dagon's Oath, translated by Belika's father, he could not recognize the strange words in the book, but the words in the book actively poured into him a certain strange spirit and will, plus the annotations left by Belika's father before his death, allowed him to barely guess what the book said. Praise the greatness of Father God Dagon. Wait. There are people ahead. At the corner of the crossroads, Belika stopped, raised her butt, and raised an arc like a hill, but unfortunately the person behind her did not understand the situation. She leaned to the right and looked. It's the Innsmouth people. After turning the corner, the 2 Innsmouth people, who were getting closer and closer to turning into deep divers, opened their protruding and unable to close fish eyes, and searched in the sewer. They may be in the sewer. Look carefully. If they disrupt the ceremony, they will definitely cause the anger of the Father God. The voice was a little trembling, mentioning the worship of the Father God and the fear. We have to leave quickly. Belika pointed to the stinking ditch and said to Lizu beside him. Swimming through the water was extremely frustrating, but it was the only feasible way at the moment. Lizu's eyes finally moved away from the ritual of summoning Dagon. She grabbed Belika's wrist and pulled her behind him. While she was still confused, Lizu had already rushed out. Surprise. He jumped in front of the 2 Innsmouth people like a prank and smiled at them. The cane was like a baseball bat, and he was held in his hand. After a dull hum and the sound of the skull being smashed, the Innsmouth man had fallen to the ground. The companion standing next to him quickly raised his gun, but Lizu quickly raised his hand and grabbed his neck and lifted him up. Lizu held the skull cane in his right hand, and his index finger trembled slightly and stood in front of his lips. The Innsmouth man who was being pinched by the neck would never be stupid enough to think that the other part his finger trembling was fear. Judging from his expression, he might be excited. "Excuse me, how do I get to the prison of the Dagon cult?" He used honorifics here. The fish eyes of the Innsmouth man were almost squeezed out of his eye sockets. He struggled wildly, trying to fight back against Lizu, but the hand that was pinching his neck was too strong and took away all his strength. "Refused to answer? That's why I hate you guys' personal heroism the most." Lizu frowned and was disgusted. "Maybe." Billiker behind him looked at the fish-headed man with a deformed head on the ground and said, "Maybe he just had his neck pinched by you and couldn't speak. Is that so? I'm so sorry." Lizu apologized and let go of his hand. He just realized that it was his fault. No one dared to question it, and they would all accept his apology. The Innsmouth man fell to the ground with a thump, regaining air, and he breathed greedily. Cough cough, inevitably accompanied by coughing. The fish gill-like organs on both sides of his neck were also shaking. Before he could savor this new freedom, the cold iron pipe pressed against his forehead. He had always believed that the deep ones would be everyone's nightmare, and that Father God Dagon was the source of human fear. Now, this Mr. Innsmouth felt a different kind of fear. Not only him, but even Billiker behind Lizu also felt weak in the legs and feet, and fell to the ground. She didn't know why, but she felt that the crazy fear was spreading, which was much more terrifying than what she had seen with her own eyes. The shotgun was already against the head of the Innsmouth man, and then came a voice that was like a nightmare, and with a smile. "Miss Billiker, if it's convenient, please give me the map." "Oh, sorry." Lizu turned around and found that Billiker had fallen to the ground with limp hands and feet. He apologized, sounding insincere. Billiker and the Innsmouth man found that the fear was much less, as if this fear was deliberately created by the man in front of them. She struggled to stand up and spread the map in front of the Innsmouth man. Here the Innsmouth man trembled and pointed to the corner of the map, which was still far away from them. After saying that, he looked up at Lizu with a pleading look. If the fish face could show this expression, "May you return to the embrace of the Father." Bang. Lizu swung the shotgun, and the iron pipe hit the face of the Innsmouth man. The thick liquid exploded, not red. He might be only one step away from becoming a deep diver. Bang, the huge fish eyeball flew and landed on Billiker's high heels, then slid to the ground and was crushed by her disgusting foot. The green liquid exploded from the sole of the shoe. "This will only bring us back to Innsmouth, and we will be able to escape from Innsmouth soon." Billiker pointed to the map. "Going further is the railway. We can go to the nearby town along the railway." Lizu stared at the map for a while, shrugged, and walked to the left. "Then let's go our separate ways here." Billiker looked at the back figure walking away, took a deep breath. The place he pointed to is the old fish cannery. "You be careful." Lizu raised his right hand and waved to him. "This road does not seem to be a dead end, but a road full of hope. At least this road is more interesting." Chapter 124. FBI's acquaintance. The old fish cannery, the sewer, the dirt, the rats, and the lingering stench. "No news yet?" The Innsmouth man who spoke climbed the ladder into the sewer. His voice sounded very strange, as if it was difficult for him to make human sounds again. "No." The voice of the Innsmouth man above sounded like a woman. "I don't know where this monster came from, but it killed so many compatriots. He can't run away. If I meet him, I will definitely shoot his head off." The Innsmouth man who climbed the ladder landed on his feet, grabbed the flashlight, and turned around quickly. Suddenly a black shadow passed by. Who? He became nervous. But when he approached the darkness with the flashlight, there was nothing unusual. The female Innsmouth man laughed at him from above. "Haha, coward, aren't you going to shoot his head off? I'm just a little disgusted by rats." He also felt a burning sensation on his face because of his nervousness just now. Swish, another black shadow flashed in the darkness. "What's wrong? Are you scared by rats again?" The female Innsmouth laughed. "Something's wrong." He bit the flashlight and pulled out his gun. "We both have guns. If he dares to come out, we will shoot him into a sieve immediately," the female Innsmouth said disdainfully. Along with it, there was the sound of bullets being loaded. She believed in her companion's intuition and became alert. The male Innsmouth suddenly smelled a strong perfume. He turned his head, but a pistol was pressed against his forehead, stopping the next action. Woman. The Innsmouth man didn't remember that such a foreign woman came to Innsmouth. The Harley Quinn, with an exaggerated smile on her face, grinned at him. We have two people too. Bang, a gunshot sounded in the distance, and the female Innsmouth man above his head lost weight and fell down. Lizu had already aimed at the female Innsmouth man above his head in the dark. When the Harley Quinn appeared and hooked the other party to stick her head out and look down, he decisively shot. Bye, ugly mermaid. Harley Quinn waved her hand and pulled the trigger without hesitation. Bang. This place is terrible. Harley Quinn checked the bullets, put the pistol in her belt, close to her butt, and then lowered her head to pick up the shotgun. She held the shotgun with both hands and gestured with baseball. It seemed that she liked this weapon. The women here are really poorly maintained. She noticed the corpse of the female Innsmouth on the ground. Except for the bulge in the chest, the corpse had almost no other human characteristics. A deep diver who was only one step away. Harley Quinn's eyes were mainly focused on the protruding and eyelidless eyes of the corpse. Does she usually wear eyeliner? What's wrong? She finished talking to herself and noticed that Lizu was staring at the sewer wall in front of him. We are here? Harley Quinn tilted her head, her two-color hair hanging on her face and left shoulder, and her small face with thick oil paint was full of doubts. Lizu walked to the wall and gently touched the wall with both hands. Toyization. The solid wall of the underground sewer quickly turned into a toy. Lizu kicked the colorful wall that had turned into Lego blocks. Crash. The wall collapsed and the Lego blocks fell all over the floor. Bang. The blocks hanging on the wall also fell down, and Lizu lowered his head and crossed the wall. It stinks in here. Harley Quinn carried a shotgun, covered her nose, and followed over the wall. The iron cages held people who had lost hope. They just raised their heads and glanced at the arrival of Lizu and the others, and then lowered their heads. Burnham? Lizu asked. I'm the young man in the iron cage in the corner responded. What's the matter? I'm a detective sent by Mr. Delaporte to investigate. Burnham looked at the wall that had turned into something strange. Detective? This ability is beyond the level of a detective. Because you stole from the company and caused huge losses to Mr. Delaporte, I need to come to you to investigate the situation. Lizu looked around, and there was no Innsmouth guarding here. I didn't embezzle. It was the Dagon cult. They wanted to take me to Devil's Reef. Burnham sighed. I hope you can prove my innocence to Mr. Delaporte after you leave here. Why don't you prove your innocence yourself? Harley Quinn came to the cage. Her curvy figure and exposed skin were hot and made people's noses bleed. Burnham's face was a little red. It's useless. No one can escape from the Dagon cult. Even if you can break the cage, we can't leave Innsmouth alive. Oh, it turns out to be a coward. Harley Quinn nodded in sudden realization. Not a coward. You don't know how powerful the Dagon cult is here. Click. Someone is unlocking the door. Creak. The door opened. The two Innsmouth people who walked in immediately noticed the broken wall and two people who didn't belong here standing outside the cage. Bang, bang. Shh, don't interrupt. Harley Quinn blew a puff of the smoking pistol and put the gun back into her waist while shaking it. After the gunshot, the body staggered to the ground. You are in big trouble. Get out of here quickly. Burnham hugged his arms and shrank into the corner. I hope you can escape successfully. He chose to stay here for a while. If he escaped, he would definitely die more miserably. Lizu shrugged, turned around and prepared to return to the sewer. Wait. On the other side, another person stopped the two people who were about to leave. Take me out. The man in a suit, who was still a little embarrassed, stood in the cage. He had been paying attention to Lizu since he broke through the wall. We took the train together, remember? The man reminded Lizu. We got off in Arkham Town, remember me? Oh, Lizu nodded and shook his head in the other's happy and expectant eyes. I don't remember, but I can save you. His hand touched the iron railing and the railing turned into soft rubber. The man only needed to squeeze it lightly to get out. You don't know me, but you still want to save me? I'm McGee, detective. McGee stretched out his hand to shake hands with Lizu. He took a look at the iron railing that had completely turned into another material, as well as the Lego wall, and retracted his hand embarrassedly. He's a policeman. The Joker girl standing next to Lizu sniffed sharply next to McGee. Disgusting smell. Policeman? Lizu, who had no interest in McGee, suddenly turned his head to look at McGee, and before McGee could react, he had already stretched out his hand and shook his hand. McGee's eyes went dark, and when he opened his eyes again, he was knocked to the ground by a sickening dizziness. McGee was very keen to notice that his cellmates were looking at him with horror. Should we just kill him here? Harley Quinn suggested. We are good citizens in this world. How can we kill the police? And Lizu smiled at McGee. We still need the help of this FBI man. Chapter 125 Devil's Reef. McGee looked at Lizu with deep eyes in shock, wondering how he guessed his identity. No, it was weird. There was a smell of blood in the air. McGee turned around and found that the cell door had been opened and there were 2 rows of Innsmouth corpses on the ground. Many people in the iron cages also died. There must have been a chaotic battle just now. Why did it only take a moment for him to fall into darkness? Did he fall into a coma for several hours the moment the man in front of him held his hand? Mr. Agent, you are free. Harley Quinn chewed bubble gum and blew out purple bubbles. Pop, the bubble exploded, and the pink tongue rolled the bubble into the red lips. The air was filled with the smell of grapes, very sweet, and the sweetness was incompatible with the Syrah and the air here. Yow wow, let's go. Lizu turned around and left through the hole in the wall. The dark cell, the pungent smell of blood, and the stench of the sewer. The air was so quiet that it was hard to breathe. Watching the 2 people leaving, McGee's sharp intuition as an agent made him not follow them, but asked Burnham in the cage, what happened just now? Someone was laughing. Their spirits, which had been tortured by the Innsmouth people, seemed to have completely collapsed after seeing the terrible scene just now. Burnham licked his lips, and his tongue was stinging from the cracked skin on his lips. I just shook hands with him, and then I fainted. What happened? McGee asked. The young man in front of him seemed to be the only one with a normal mind here. You didn't faint. Burnham's voice was hoarse, as if filled with fear. He took a deep breath. He grabbed you and shook you gently, and you turned into a toy doll, the same height as you. Then, he found your ID on you. The people from the Dagon cult rushed in, and they were all shot and killed by the crazy woman next to him. Then, he patted you, and you turned back. What? I turned into a toy doll? McGee had reason to believe that this young man must be crazy, just like everyone else. The next action must be taken as soon as possible. McGee looked at the hole in the wall and the Lego blocks on the ground, gritted his teeth and rushed over. Just let the agent go like this? Harley Quinn stuck her butt out and climbed up with her hands and feet. Climbing up through the sewer, the old fish canning factory. In the factory, except for the smell of fish, there was only darkness. Perhaps something strange would suddenly come out, but after waiting for a long time, you would find that the world was still quiet. The basement next door was the prison of the Dagon cult. Don't you think it's time to let those righteous police officers beat up the bad guys? Lizu nodded seriously, not knowing what he was calculating. His eyes stayed on the book of Dagon in his hand. What should we do next? Go here. Here. The Joker girl poked her head out curiously, leaning her head on Lizu's arm to look at the book. Devil's Reef. Where is it? It seems not far from here. Lizu closed the book of Dagon. The 2 of them had no sense of being hunted and walked out of the old fish cannery leisurely. In the distance was the patrolling Innsmouth people, their hunched figures like ghosts wandering in the dark. They bypassed the lights and walked along the path to the seaside, hiding behind the rocks on the seaside. When Lizu was about to find a boat to go to Devil's Reef, the Innsmouth man who drove a car arrived first, cursing and dragging 2 large sacks on the car. The sacks were thrown on the beach, making a muffled sound. He's throwing away bodies. How scary. Killing people and throwing away bodies. Harley Quinn muttered beside Lizu. If you don't see the excitement on her face and only listen to her voice, you might believe that this is a poor girl who is extremely scared. But after seeing her face, you can only call her a lunatic. Yes, she is laughing excitedly. You are too talkative. The outsider was not caught, so you don't even have the chance to go to Devil Reef. Just go on your way with peace of mind. The Innsmouth man muttered. I always do this kind of dirty work. After throwing the sack, the Innsmouth man drove away. After the taillights of the car disappeared in the night sky, Lizu and Harley Quinn walked out of the darkness, and the sharp tip of the cane scratched the bag. Two bodies, one from the old drunkard who told Lizu a story not long ago, and the other from Thomas, whose wife is a deep diver. Both of them were livid and suffocated to death. Do you know him? Harley Quinn observed Lizu's expression and guessed. Well, because I died, the Innsmouth man of the Dagon cult is far more terrifying than a lunatic. Because of talking to a stranger, he killed 2 people. They are so pitiful. Harley Quinn had several meanings in her words, squatting on the ground and poking the corpse gently. Then let's avenge them. Revenge? Harley Quinn was very good at catching words that interested her. Yes, revenge. He haha. There was no anger on his face, only the expectation of revenge. Like superheroes looking for villains? It must be more interesting than that, because we might die. Lee Zucheng stepped over the corpse and walked towards the sea, staring at the Devil Reef in the distance. There were figures flickering on the reef, holding their breath and watching, but nothing could be seen. The Black Sea seemed to hide some kind of monster with many tentacles and eyes. Just staring at the sea surface would make people's hearts beat uncontrollably and their minds go crazy. On the contrary, the 2 of them looked a little more normal. Really? That must be much more interesting than the superhero game. Harley Quinn also got excited. Lizu and Harley Quinn boarded a broken boat and headed towards the Devil Reef. The Devil Reef was not too far away and could be reached in about half an hour. Squeak, bang, bang, bang. Beside the railway, the iron net of the sewage ditch was kicked open by 2 violent kicks from the inside. The iron net was kicked open, and a man covered in black mud rolled out. Pa. He climbed up from the sewage and spit out the dirty water in his mouth. It was McG who was rescued by Lizu. After a night of embarrassing escape, McG was almost caught by the Innsmouth people and the deep diver several times, and finally escaped from this hell. He ran along the railway all night. From the beginning, there were pursuers, and then the sound of the pursuers became smaller and smaller, leaving only the chirping of insects at night. Arriving at the battlefront, McG broke into the hotel. FBI, I want to requisition your phone. McG took out his ID from his torn suit and wiped off the sewage on his cuffs. The hotel owner hesitated. Quick. This time it was a pistol that was slapped on the table. Yes, sir, this way. McG exhaled heavily and dialed the number he remembered in his heart. This is McG. There's a problem with the operation. The voice in the phone receiver paused. What's going on? Kerner is dead, and those Innsmouth people are different from what we think. There's no problem with their refinery. McG paused and glanced at the trembling innkeeper next to him. Can we contact the local police? Yes. I'll go right away. The innkeeper quickly rushed out the door. After making sure that there was no one else in the hotel lobby, McG said, I learned in prison that they believe in cults and have communicated with monsters in the sea. Many people have died. McG swallowed hard, swallowing the mysterious man and woman's affairs mixed with the dirty smell of the sewer. The voice on the other end of the phone said, we have made full preparations for the week you disappeared. If necessary, we will catch the monster there, and the Book of Dagon. The person on the other end of the phone seemed to know everything a long time ago, but only now began to point out the real goal. McG realized that the group of people above him seemed to have other intentions. Agent, we must get that ancient cult book to prevent the evil creature from the deep sea from awakening. Then we, McG asked tentatively, attack. The phone was hung up. The Book of Dagon? McG kept repeating in his mouth. He had never heard of the Book of Dagon. Suddenly, he froze. McG recalled that the yellow man with strange abilities seemed to have such a book in his hands. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.